What up, everybody? I am your host, JP, and this is my co host, Josh.
Hey, everybody.
And welcome back to another episode of the Film Bros podcast. Josh,
Yeah.
we got some exciting things for the fans out there today, the people that listen, the people that support us. Shout out to y'all.
Exactly.
2024 is going to be great. I've been posting
Manifesting.
Manifesting. We've been posting it on our Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
We've been posting it on Instagram. You know,
all our socials.
All our socials.
At FilmBros Podcast.
There you go. All our successes. We were lucky enough to be able to book. Lucky, grateful, blessed, whatever it may be. We were able to get some guests. Yeah. And plan out some big things for this year. And one of those big things is going to start with this episode right here. For those listening, I'm about to break it down for you guys right after Josh gives you everywhere you guys can talk to us, give us topics, movies to review. If you guys want to support us in a big way or catch a live one of these days, it's a different episode. So we're just going to get that out of the way right now. Go ahead, Josh.
Twitter, TikTok, Instagram at FilmBros Podcast. We post new episodes are up. You can hit us there for any news or movies you want us to cover. Buzzsprout, link is in the bottom of the socials I just gave you. Support us there. It's like a Patreon. You help us out. We shout you out on episodes. You get special perks on the side. It's great. We'd appreciate it. Thank you. You can listen to us anywhere you get your podcast at FilmBros Podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, things like that. We're on a bunch of sites. Check us out at FilmBros Podcast. Be part of the conversation at Twitch at FilmBros Podcast. We are still trying to get that up, but bear with us. Keep the notifications on, and I promise, be part of the conversation. Twitch at FilmBros Podcast. And then subscribe to our YouTube at FilmBros Podcast.
Of course, all those socials. We want to hear your guys' thoughts even after this episode as well. With that being said, you guys seen the title. You guys know what we're basically going to talk about. What you guys don't know is that we do have a collaboration in full effect. We are going to, every single month for the next few months leading up to Star Wars Day, we're putting out one Star Wars special per month. We're going to be breaking down the prequel trilogy in this episode.
Yeah.
And then we'll move on to the OG trilogy next month, in the beginning of the month. Make sure you guys have your notifications on so you guys don't miss an episode. The following month, we'll go ahead and break down the sequel trilogy after that. And then on Star Wars Day, you will get us a full ranking of our Star Wars overview.
Yeah.
And not just ours here at the Film Bros Podcast. Like I said, we do have a collaboration in the works. It's been a great time talking, meeting with them, getting everything out of the way to basically prepare us for this journey. We're going to be making a few parts, as I said. They have their own podcast. They're called the Force Unscripted podcast. We are going to be doing all these next few collaborations with them when it comes to the Star Wars topic. They are well versed in the Star Wars genre. They have their own podcast. They're on Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts, I'm assuming, and they're a great listen. So without further ado, we'd like to introduce the Force Unscripted podcast. They talk all things Star Wars. We got Nikita here and Winchie from the Force Unscripted. If you guys want to say hello real quick.
Oh, what's up, everyone? It's your boy Nikita. The Force Unscripted is a little Star Wars podcast that I had the idea of for like 2 years, but finding people to come on board and actually have a schedule that works is kind of hard. I feel like all podcasters kind of know that to some degree. But I'm a big Star Wars fanatic. I have about $90,000 worth of Star Wars merch in my room between all the adult novels from the Legends timeline, most of the current Disney timelines, a bunch of statues, helmets, lightsabers, all that kind of stuff. So I've been a diehard Star Wars fan since I was little. And then this is my co-host Winchie. He'll introduce himself.
Howdy, I'm Wenshi. Like Nikita, I am also a huge Star Wars nerd. I actually came out the womb ready for Star Wars. I was born on Star Wars Day, so don't let Nikita fool you. I'm the biggest fan here. And yeah, but I'm a big Mandalorian buff, so that's kind of my shtick.
Okay. And yeah, we basically the namesake of the podcast comes from Star Wars: The Force Unleashed, which was my favorite game. growing up, and so I got the inspiration for the name The Force Unscripted because, well, one, I'm honestly pretty lazy and I don't like to do a lot of planning, seeing as that I kind of view myself as like a nerdy lexicon of Star Wars knowledge. So basically the premise of our show is we pick kind of like a broad topic, you know, like a week or two beforehand, and kind of let it sit in our head for a little bit, and then we just come and we just start running our mouths and shit talking each other for, you know, about 30 minutes to an hour for each episode on that topic, and then we wait till the next one and just wash, rinse, and repeat.
Oh, very nice, very good.
Okay.
Yeah. I had the pleasure of listening to a few episodes, and I even saw the name, and I was like, this had to be part of the Force Unleashed,
For sure, yeah.
or something like that. And I gotta ask, man, are you upset that they haven't made Starkiller canon within the actual timeline?
Oh, absolutely. I've been bitching about it like at least like once every 3 episodes or so, especially since with all the stuff that we learned about like the Ahsoka series and like the Anakin being in the world between worlds and like having Ahsoka as his Padawan. I'm like, well, this is the perfect time to bring in Starkiller. You got the light side female portion of it. Now you need the dark side male version. Who would fit that better than Starkiller?
Okay, all right, yeah. So we thank you guys for coming on. We obviously, everybody out there, go give them a follow, listen. They're really good. Their expertise is off the charts. That's why we picked them for this multiple parter. Winchie's birthday is on Star Wars Day. That's when our full ranking will come out. We're planning to do a few parts with the Force Unscripted in this kind of collaboration. So I hope you guys are excited about that as well, Nikita and Winchie.
Absolutely.
And the reason why we picked you guys is because obviously Star Wars is the topic. We wanted somebody just like yourself who is knowledgeable within the Star Wars universe, not only in film, because we are more of a film podcast, and yes, we do go into, you know, legends, canons. We'll talk about it because I am also into the canon and the legends books that were out before Disney, you know, scooped it up and did what they did. And I'm just, you know, I'm excited to hear your guys' perspective on these movies, to be honest.
Basically, I mean, I just to like get a sense of everything going on, I really enjoy the prequels, so this should be interesting.
See, and I'm also a lover of the prequels because, you know, like what I think episode 3 came out in like '05, and that was like my first year of middle school. So like they definitely hit me during my formative years. And then, you know, I just, yeah. So I really did love the prequels. Like I never understood the people back then who were like trashing on, you know, like the OG Star Wars fans. They were like trashing on the prequels.
Yeah.
I'm like, why? This is really like, this is really good. And then like I got a little older and I kind of rewatched them and I was like, okay, I could kind of see how they might think it's like a little cringe or a little, you know, very like, I wouldn't say polar to the original trilogy, but, you know, definitely different. And I was like, but I still think these are the shit, you know?
Yeah.
I 100% agree. What about you, Winchie? What do you think about the prequel trilogy?
Well, I was a little younger than Nikita when the third one came out. I don't actually think I saw it in theaters. I wish I did. But I grew up watching the original trilogy with my grandpa. And I think most of the movies I watched with him. And so I got to hear a lot of like what he was saying about the movies. He never had anything as bad to say about the prequels as he did about the sequels. So I mean, I'm gonna give it. I'll stick it there. Like, if my grandpa said they were okay, then they're probably pretty good.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer. I think Star Wars is a franchise that anybody to a degree can enjoy. Now, especially that Disney has gotten control of it, I think they try to widen that net. We're obviously going to discuss all those things as we go down in this collaboration together. But for today, we will be discussing the prequels. We're going to touch up on our likes or dislikes. We're going to go ahead and run down the public perception of them when they were released. I know, you know, some of us are young guys and don't really remember when they were released. I am one who remembers that time, and, you know, I'm living to see now people literally just changing their mind about it. So I'm gonna share my screen with you guys right now. I hope you guys are will be able to see it. Let me know if you guys can see it.
I can.
Yep.
Okay, so Rotten Tomatoes, obviously, I know a lot of people are like, well, Rotten Tomatoes is rigged. Rotten Tomatoes is this and that, la, 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 la. We like to go based on the Rotten Tomatoes. So for the people out there, we're going to go ahead and get started. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, came out in 1999. Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman. It wasn't Hayden Christensen at the time.
Yeah.
It was somebody else, obviously. Directed by George Lucas. Had a 52% Rotten score and a 59% audience score. The critic score and the audience score kind of match each other. Josh, what are your thoughts on that score? Do you think it matches up? Do you think it's wrong?
I don't know if I agree, but I think it makes sense. You know what I mean? It's a lot of the critics are always gonna think about this kind of movie as like boring or whatever, and the audiences at the time, depending on when they decided to put this review up, I think they probably felt the same way. You know, a lot of Star Wars fans were probably just like, this isn't it. But okay. I don't think I agree with it.
Okay. And for the Force Unscripted guys, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Rotten Tomatoes, correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you guys have credibility towards? Do you feel like there's credibility towards them? Do you feel like they're a bunch of bullshit liars? What do you think?
I mean, I always take their word for it for the most part. Like whenever I'm going to, because I don't really go to the movie theaters anymore unless it's like a date or something, right? And so like whenever I want to watch a movie, whether it be through legal or illegal means on the internet, I always look up Rotten Tomatoes score first. Like that's my first thing I do before I decide if I'm going to watch a movie. If I see like I'm never going to watch anything that, unless it comes like recommended from friends, I'm never going to watch anything that has below like a 55. That's like my cutoff.
Okay.
So
so
obviously I didn't have Rotten Tomatoes when episode 1 came out, but I guess based on I feel like Star Wars is my exception. So like I probably would ignore what Rotten Tomatoes has anything to say about Star Wars because I would watch it regardless. But 55 is like my cutoff.
Okay, normally, but Star Wars obviously gives you leeway, obviously. So what about you, Winchie? What do you think about Rotten Tomatoes, and what do you think about the score?
I think in the past I've given more credibility to Rotten Tomatoes than I do like now. Like a lot of the movies I've enjoyed in recent years had very low Rotten Tomato scores. Not, maybe that just says something about my taste, but in the past, like it definitely lined up with my expectations. It's just more recently that I felt like their ratings haven't been like as well matched to like the public perception as I think they used to be. So I've just kind of stopped paying attention to those. I don't even look at ratings anymore because I just don't feel like they match up.
That's where the whole thing of like, oh, they're paid off or whatever came from, because I don't think half the time they match up either. And even then, I don't believe in critic scores anyway. I think everyone should just form their own opinion. So listening to Rotten Tomatoes when a new movie comes out, it's not for me, or IGN or anything like that. I just see it because I'm like, that's funny. I don't believe half the time that it's accurate.
Okay. And what do you think about this score? Or you just think, hey, it's not worth it, Winchie?
This score in particular for the Phantom Menace, I'm just looking at the scores on the screen right now, and I'm already thinking to myself that the score is like directly proportional to the amount of screen time that Jar Jar Binks had. And that's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, that makes sense. I vibe with that. That's a good answer. Let's go on to Star Wars Episode 2: Attack of the Clones. Ewan McGregor is back as Obi-Wan. Obviously, Hayden Christensen has taken on the mantle as Anakin Skywalker. Natalie Portman is his lover, obviously. We're going to discuss, obviously, how we feel about that. But 65% on the tomato meter. It's not rotten. It's good. And then a 56% audience score. Josh, how are we feeling about that one?
That one feels a little bit closer, but at the same time, I don't agree. I don't think there's any way that this movie is rated higher by critics than The Phantom Menace, if that makes any sense.
Okay. Okay.
I think it's just
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure Wenxi's gonna disagree with you on that one. I think 2 is his favorite.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Interesting. I mean, what one obviously is it could go either way. I feel there's nothing there's I feel like no Phantom Menace has a 50-50 split regardless. But Attack of the Clones, I feel like that one was more 60-40, 70-30 with 70% people really not liking it. So with this score, I'm not really sure. I'm happy it's getting love like that, but the audience seemed to not have really loved it. But what do you guys think?
I think that just in general, like the prequels are like just from looking at the scores that I'm seeing on Rotten Tomatoes, like that you guys are showing us, I think that they're all lower than what they actually are. I feel like these scores, excluding 3, looking at the numbers, I think these are more based towards when they came out as opposed to like current perception, because now all the Star Wars fans who watch those movies like when they came out are like adults now, right? So like I feel like there's more appreciation for it. Like when Hayden Christensen came out after he reprised his role as Anakin in the Obi-Wan series, like the amount of love that man got compared to the hate he got when they first came out is just like complete, like there is nothing but just complete and absolute juxtaposition between those two positions, right? So I feel like these scores may be more accurate to like the 2002 release date. I feel like even though I agree with you that 1 is better than 2, and I don't think when she shares that same opinion, but like I think that these are still overall kind of low for the movies themselves.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's probably because they're dated, most likely.
Yeah,
yeah,
episode
definitely.
3 coming with 79%, and it was certified fresh with a 66% audience score. So, what about you, Winchie? Do you kind of share that same opinion, or what do you think?
So like I said, am a Mandalorian fanatic. So automatically I'm gonna give episode 2 a higher rating than episode 1, because Jango Fett's in it. And plus we get to see like the first, introduction of all the clones. I was obsessed with the clones when I was a kid. I thought they were super cool. And I could give like I don't really care about the romance and stuff, like if it was done well or not, or the fact that Padme and Anakin's age disparity is a little questionable, or a lot questionable, and like none of that really matters. I really cared about like the actual world building that they did, and I think they did a very good job of setting the scene for like a larger galactic scale conflict. Whereas in the first one you just get like a small taste of some potential like bad actors in the universe, but you're really focused on like a singular planet, where Attack of the Clones is much more spread out and kind of gives rise to the whole separatist versus the Republic kind of thing. I don't know. I think in terms of world building, I think it did a lot better. But at the time, I can see people being like, "Dude, this Clone Wars stuff, isn't as great as Obi-Wan made it out to be in that single line from Episode 4."
Okay. And we're gonna break all that down, and what I already want to give pushback, but I'm gonna give it a second there, Winchie. You're crossing the line, but there's the public perception, and this is what Nikita kind of brought up. Back in the day, the perception was kind of bad on the prequel series. Do you feel that the perception of, kind of like what Nikita was saying, the perception would be different if the movies were released today than when they were released back in the day?
Having like rewatched a few of them recently, I don't think so. I think a lot of people are attributing like the nostalgia factor to it. And that's giving it a lot of, buff in terms of like people's scores, but I don't feel like those people are actually going back and like rewatching the movies all that often. They're just thinking back on their childhood and like, dang, Star Wars was so cool. But if you go back and like rewatch them, there's still plenty of those like cringe elements and whatnot in them that people were giving it low ratings for in the beginning.
Now, to counter to that point, I feel like if they were released, like say the same time that the sequel trilogy came out, but like with more modern like film elements and like plotline writing, I think that they would do better than what they did when they came out. Because one thing that I love, I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but on YouTube, if you go look up there's like a bunch of like reimagined trailers of all the movies that this one guy does, and it's like the episode 3 trailer if episode 3 was released now. And like if you watch those trailers, not only are they so much better than the actual original release trailers, but like the way that they're done makes them seem way more exciting than they really are. So I think that like if the release dates of these movies were moved up, you know, like a decade and a half, 2 decades, and they were released in like a more modern film style, I think they would be more well received. But obviously, you know, we can't ever get that. We're not going to get like, you know, they were released when they were released. And I agree with Winchie on that. Like I went back and I watched these movies probably about a month before I got in contact with you guys, and I was like, oh, this is pretty bad. I still love them, but this is pretty interesting. Come on, Jar Jar.
Well, yeah, they got as close as they could with updating the visual effects and stuff. Like they didn't make Yoda a puppet anymore in Phantom Menace. Like he's been it's all been a little bit updated
with the Blu-ray revisions.
Yeah.
I like that.
See,
I like
haven't
that they
seen
did
the
that,
Blu-ray revision.
Oh, you haven't? You what do you watch it on?
Just like YouTube Pirate Bay, something like that.
Oh, okay.
Got you.
Yeah, so you're still watching like the OG 1999 one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's the Blu-ray and the 4K revisions where they kind of update it. I think the original trilogy, they put in a bunch of like new scenes, and they put a bunch of like CGI animals around to kind of make it feel more immersive, kind of like the prequel trilogy was.
Yeah.
Obviously, they try to up it with there, and then in the OG trilogy, they didn't really have as much funds or technology to do that back in the day. But you did make a point that if today they had better writers and, you know, more modernized style, that it would, you know, been more well received. So obviously the writer and the director of these first 6 films was none other than Granddaddy, Mac Daddy, George Lucas. All right. Do you guys feel as though his writing and him wanting to take that full control, did it hurt the prequel trilogy? Did it, you know, did you feel like it kind of gave a little bit more connection to the OG trilogy? What do you guys think about that? We'll start with the Force Unscripted.
So my thing when the originals came out, or like the prequels came out, was that I had already seen the originals, right? So I had like this idea of, and specifically like Yoda, like I had this idea of Yoda just from seeing like episode 5 and 6. And when I went back and I watched the prequels, I had a lot of questions, because like Yoda in the sequel trilogy is basically batshit crazy at that point. And like Yoda from the prequel trilogy is a lot more stoic, head of the Jedi Order, you know, is like a certain way, is still like his batshit craziness pops out every now and then. But there's a lot of like, well, how did, you know, like, why is he like this, you know, by the time the originals come around? And I just had a lot of questions about that. And I also had a lot of questions about what the fuck happens between episode 2 and episode 3 that Anakin like gets like this, right? Because like it didn't make much sense to me, as like, not one, I'm a kid, so I'm not like assuming a bunch of things that I would assume if I was an adult. But like the fact that after the prequels, the Clone Wars come out, and then you're like, oh, okay, Anakin goes through a whole bunch of fucking shit between those 2 movies, and that's why he's like that in episode 3. It answered a bunch of questions, and which I think that like not only George Lucas, but like Disney is kind of doing the same thing, where like these movies leave a lot of gaps for information that you don't have just yet. And both of them, like whether if it was Star Wars under George Lucas or Star Wars under Disney, they've gone back with series and kind of filled those in. And I don't really like that, honestly, but I like that the closure that it gives me. So I think that like George Lucas did an okay job of doing his movies as compared to what Disney did with the sequel trilogy and then filling in with the series. But I still feel like George Lucas, I don't want to say dropped the ball on the prequels, but could have done better. This was a conversation that we had also had with one of our other co-hosts, Bonk Bonk. He mentioned that like for the original trilogy, like George Lucas also had like his wife kind of like help him with some of the stuff for the original trilogy that he didn't have for the prequel trilogy. And I think that that definitely kind of shows, like when you think about that little, you know, tidbit, fun fact, whatever you want to call it. but again, I'm still a lover. I'm always gonna be a lover of the prequels, no matter how cringe or they're dated like the OG trilogy is now at this point, because they're like, well, the prequel trilogy is 20 years old and the original trilogy is way older. But I still feel like they're good in their own aspects. It's the original trilogy in my head is good movies and good Star Wars, and the prequel trilogy in my head is okay movies, kind of cringe, but still good Star Wars, and that's all I really care about at the end of the day.
Okay, just to kind of get to your point, it's George Lucas made a good world of Star Wars, but you would say the writing and the production value wasn't really hitting.
Correct. Nothing hits like the OG trilogy. Everything else after that is just lesser, in my opinion.
Okay, what about you, Winchy? What do you think about George Lucas have taken the reins of the prequel trilogy and him being that divisive thing?
I'm actually for once pretty much exactly aligned with Nikita's opinion on this, except for the part where he said that like the prequel trilogies don't hit as good as the OG, and except for the part where Jango Fett drops those seismic charges from the back
Oh
of
my
the
fucking!
slave
Here
line.
we go again. God damn it! He's
That
obsessed with that sound.
That
Oh my
sound
God.
hits all my happy nerves. Like my brain, every time I hear that sound, it's just like, oh,
I can agree.
Like
I can agree.
Oh
I can
my
agree.
God.
It's the best. When I heard it in Mandalorian, bro, I geeked. I geeked, bro.
Yes, I love it. But yeah, no, I was also gonna mention his wife, how she did like make some of the bits and pieces of the original trilogy like flow. I think she had a lot of say in some of the like battles, especially the final battle that I think wrapped it up the way it needed to be wrapped up. And that kind of like, I wouldn't say she was like the divisive factor between the OG and the prequel that like changed kind of how the end result came out in terms of like production. But I would agree exactly that like the OG was good movies and good Star Wars. Prequel was great Star Wars, but like okay movies.
I don't agree at all.
Yeah.
I think he carried all of it. Like
George Lucas?
Yeah,
Okay.
from 1 through 6. I think I think all the complaints that people have, like bad dialogue or whatever, I don't understood it. I never understood that. I always felt like because it's supposed to be an opera, I assume that the way they talk is just an exaggerated form of our English. And so I never understood that complaint either. Like
Now when you
feel from
when you talk
1
about
through 6.
oh, God, sorry.
Sorry, I'm still going. My bad. 1 through 6, I think he just continued to just do his thing throughout the whole his whole saga, basically,
Okay.
before giving it up to Disney.
Okay. What were you getting at, Nikita?
So with what you said about the dialogue, I completely agree. If you're talking about either the novelizations of the first 6 movies, or you're talking about episode 3 in particular, I don't think that opera thing holds up for the first 2. Because I really appreciate the dialogue of 3, because like Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker is going through some shit, and you notice as the movie goes on, the cadence of his voice changes. Like the reason why when he's like having that dialogue with Obi-Wan of like, if you're not with me, you're against me, like he's talking in the same cadence that James Earl Jones talked in Vader's voice, just without the respirator, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is a great like homage to James Earl Jones and his voicing of Vader, and the fact that the cadences are similar is great. But I think that that's the only movie that does that. The dialogue of the first 2 is not what I wanted it to be. Now I will give like episode 1 a slight pass, because I think Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon Jinn is like one of the most perfect castings that they've done for a Star Wars character outside of like Obi-Wan and Anakin. I think Qui-Gon Jinn was casted perfectly by Liam Neeson, and I think that the way that he speaks and does Qui-Gon is like an absolute true tribute to the character. But those are the only aspects of those 3 that I think really make those movies pop. Outside of that, the rest is just kind of for me, except again for the lightsaber choreography. I think that the lightsaber choreography of the first 3 have all of the other movies completely beat.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like for the first one, even when they were talking about politics, it felt like something else. You know what I mean?
Like grand.
Yeah. Like just keep talking about the Republic and things like that, because that kind of interests me. And I know the Clone Wars dives deeper into it, but the dialogue for the first three movies, the prequel movies, for me felt like good. I never understood the whole he's bad at dialogue or whatever. Even the storytelling. Like, I know obviously we needed the Clone Wars to bridge the gap between 2 and 3, but I think from 2 and then to 3, it all kind of bridges together. The Clone Wars just gives us the context, or a lot more context, but I think it happens all kind of fluently, if anything.
No, well, not too much, because there's still, like how Nikita said, there's still gaps between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. You know, there's not a lot of context there besides, okay, Anakin grew up and then started like boning Padme. Like, when did the love relationship come up? And then you can get comics and you can read into that, but at the time when George Lucas was in charge and was had the keys to the kingdom, basically, it was cool when he bridged that gap between the OG to the prequel, because, you know, in a different episode we're going to talk deeper into the OG, but at least he, you know, kept that same energy and brought it to the prequel trilogy. Do I feel like the movies would have benefited from maybe a different perspective than out of George Lucas's brain? Yes, because even though I even see clips where people pull up like that whole thing when Padme and Anakin are in the field and on the animal, and they make fun of the dialogue right there.
Yeah.
But if you do notice, in every single movie, it's how George Lucas kind of envisions it, because he kind of maintains that pace. He felt like because it was a prequel era than the OG, they shouldn't be talking the way they talk in the OG. They should be talking, you know, fancier and, you know, a little bit more elegant and out there. So I mean, there was connectivity there, and I appreciate his Star Wars and, you know, him bringing it back and bringing it out. It's just the writing could have used a little bit of a touch up. I can say for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I would just say
agree with that.
Only I think just the dialogue. I mean, it would have helped with people and the perception of what people see it today, because I do see a lot of people clowning the dialogue, and I kind of feel like that's where the downfall happens. And if you look back at it for CGI purposes, and I mean, now you could look at it and be like, wow, that shit is so dated. But at the time that it came out, this was revolutionary. Star Wars was the first one to.
Well, yeah, Jar Jar Binks was a full CGI character, so
they brought that shit into fruition. Now we're at the point where we're getting the Incredible Hulk as all CGI and all this and that, depending on what you guys think of that. Too, but MCU, whatever, that's a different topic for a different day. But I do think that George Lucas, maybe not so much as a director, I think he had some. If he had a little training under his belt, it would have helped it out a little bit. But at least the writing aspect, it could have used some work.
I don't think so.
No.
You talked about the way that they were talking, like that it should be different between the prequels and the OG. But like, this is a civilization that's like almost 30,000 years old. Like a 20-year gap between two different events really shouldn't drastically alter the way that people talk. And I think you can see that a little bit in episode 4, the way that Obi-Wan talks and the way that like Grand Moff Tarkin talk. They still talk just like the OG, or not the prequel trilogy. Like, and I don't think that there really should be that much distinction between the two, except for the fact that when you're talking about like the politics portion of that, politicians in general talk different than like the general public do anyway. And people like Luke, who are, from bumfuck nowhere, are they're definitely going to have a different like rednecks. Exactly, compared to somebody who's, spent their whole life like Leia did, in the Galactic Senate.
Yeah. Yes, but if you put into the context that the Republic basically became a relic, and if you take into consideration that Tarkin and Obi-Wan were the ones that kind of crossed that barrier, it's because they were alive at that time and were able to carry that, and they kind of carried that throughout their life. whatever they did in the Obi-Wan show is something different. I thought that should have altered all kinds of things, but that's a different topic for a different day. But
did the Republic really become a relic? Like, you got to think about it. The Republic was in power for thousands of years and then out of power for like 24 before the New Republic shows on. So like, does it really become a relic? It's 25 years, let's say max. Like a real.
I would say so.
The
I mean,
Empire actively went
washed it
ahead.
out.
Yeah, they literally wanted it
still
to
had-
be gone.
they
They
had
didn't want no memory of it.
they had a whole currency change. They had stormtroopers instead of clone troopers. They had like people signing up for the army. I would say it fell out hella.
Yeah, I would think
But
that
they
were
still had
trying
an
to
Imperial
completely
Senate.
get rid of it. Yeah, but then as you can tell as time goes on, with especially with the context that we're getting with video games and comic books and all that,
It was mad corrupt.
it's either you got along with them or you didn't. And if you didn't, your planet is being destroyed. So politicians would go up until their breaking point, and then when they decide to stand up against them, they were washed out.
Yeah.
So it's either you get along or you die.
I mean, even in like, well, I mean, not to bring up Mando, but like in season 3, they make it a big part that, or not, in Andor, my bad. In Andor, they make it a big part saying that you still have to do your job, but you rebel quietly. So it's a whole thing about, I'm pretty sure it was wiped out, completely, a relic.
They even went as far as, with the sequel trilogy, bringing back a new Republic. They were like, it died, so we got to rebirth it new.
Yeah.
Is there an old York and a New York?
York.
Yeah.
So just York.
There's a place called York.
Yes.
Like,
There's York and a New York.
okay,
Like
that
Mexico
just
and
like
New
popped in
Mexico.
my head, to be honest. I was just like, New York, York, New
York.
York. But yeah, I would think that there would have to be some kind of a big gap difference in the way that they speak between prequels to OG trilogy, even to sequels.
Yeah.
Or no?
See, I just
Yeah,
I find that hard to agree, just because like characters like Dodonna, Mon Mothma, like Akbar, a lot of these people who become like the figureheads for the New Republic after movie 6, when the Emperor is finally dead, these are all people who existed during the Republic and who served in the Republic. Like Mon Mothma, who also shows up in Andor, who becomes the next chief of state of the New Republic. Like, she is from I don't want to say the old Republic, but the Republic before the Empire. So I feel like maybe there is some credence to what you say, especially because of like the information censorship, like the Emperor basically wanting to wipe out everything, including everything about the Jedi, everything that's written down, categorized in history. Like, definitely mad censorship, but people still remember, and those people who remember are now back in power. So I maybe there's some credence to what you say for like the people, the laymen, right? But like the people who are in power are not going to forget the ways of what happened before the Empire came into power. And they're the people who are like standing on the podium in the Grand Senate chamber talking and making legislation. So maybe there was a period where like, yeah, sure, everyone's like, oh, hush hush about the things that they once were, because we'll get godded if we talk about it. But the second the Emperor is gone, well, hey, we're not gonna get godded. There's no more censorship anymore.
Yeah, but that was
That
like
came
years.
after, yeah.
That was like years of censorship. By then, I mean, it takes 2 weeks to create a habit. So just imagine 25 years. Like, it's a long time.
But also, like, historically, like, language is one of the things that, like, oppressed people hold on to the most, because it's, like, something that is very hard to be taken away from them, because it's something you can teach by word of mouth. It's not something that's, like, you can burn their books and everything's gone. Like, oppressed people tend to, like, hold on to, like, those little bits of their culture that they can as tightly as possible. Because they don't want to like lose their way of life. So I don't. Plus, this is like a galaxy of billions of planets, right? Like, yeah, there may be a garrison or two on some of the planets with just Star Destroyer or whatnot, but like for the most part, they're all still speaking Galactic Basic and or their local languages. I just don't feel like they would just lose a galaxy-wide language or culture like that, especially when it comes to like speaking.
I don't know. There's a lot of oppressed things going on. I mean, even in Clone Wars, when they were talking about slaves and other species running other species, they would kind of cancel them out too. So imagine if not them, the Empire.
Yeah.
I think there's a good handful of things like that.
Yeah, I'm not doubting that some people were holding on, and obviously, I think
Civilized people, like
I think
Mon Mothma.
Alderaan was one of those that was holding on.
Exactly.
That's why like Leia came out royalty.
What's his name? Her dad.
Bail Organa.
Bail
Yeah,
Organa.
Bail
Yeah. That's why he held that presence as the time went on. Mon Mothma, she was there, but she was, how do you say it? She was one of those that got along in their face, but then behind closed doors, she did what she wanted. So, I mean, and then when Alderaan got destroyed, you got to think, if people are just like out of nowhere standing up to the Empire, they're getting their shit blasted.
And like, think about it. Everybody was like losing their way, and then Thrawn shows up. He's a damn Einstein to these people. He's a damn like.
The Empire was meant to crush and dumb down in order to have
to rule better.
Yeah. To have that what's it called, that rule? How you said it. So that has to be one of those, in my opinion, connectivity things that George Lucas was really trying to convey between the two
Eras.
trilogies. Yeah, the two eras, that there was a complete distinction, and this is where I can say that this is like, I guess the next step to ask is that obviously we know that there's a toxic fan base, right?
Yeah.
Star Wars.
Don't even get me started on that one.
Yeah, okay, so you guys agree there is a toxic fan base?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
100%.
I have never met a group of fans, like a fandom so wholeheartedly like wanting, like, it's like Star Wars fans want to fight, which I like to some degree, but then like the degree in which they're willing to go is way farther than I am.
Oh yeah.
So because of that, because of what George Lucas did with their with his direction and wanting to hold it together, and the way that Disney came out and tried to bring production value, a little bit more writers and stuff, it really fractured the fan base, because now you have what we believe is Star Wars and what they believe is Star Wars, and that's where like I believe that toxicity comes in. Obviously, there's some people that still ride for George Lucas 100%, still hope that he comes back, but I do think that he was one of the problems with the prequel trilogy, and so I would want him back for his connectivity and his vision, but I think writing and everything, that should have just been given to somebody else completely, because that's where we get this division, between eras and all that. It should have been a little bit, he should have consulted with somebody and been like, how long is too long, or how long is long enough for them to completely get rid of it. And, maybe there still would be conversations like this where, there's that divide, but it would have made it a little bit more known instead of us having to pick up the pieces. That makes sense.
And I don't think you mentioned like Lucas coming back. I don't think Disney will ever do that. They don't want to admit that like they suck, and have to bring back the guy that they got rid of when they took over his stuff. But I do think that them making Filoni the chief creative officer recently showed that they really do want Star Wars to be something like that they can be proud of and that they can continue to like profit from, but in a way that like makes the fans happy. And I do believe that like Filoni is basically the second coming of George Lucas. He's pretty much like his protege, and it definitely shows in some of the more recent like works like Mandalorian season 3 and Ahsoka and whatnot, where we definitely see a much more cohesive story being made. So I don't think they would ever bring back Lucas, but I do think Filoni is a great direction for them in the future.
Wow.
Jumping the gun.
Wow. But like that's gonna be a conversation, because that's an interesting take. I we're gonna put a pin on that one, Wingy, for sure. We're putting a pin on that one.
Yeah. That's
That's
right down the
fine.
line.
That's
You're
fine.
you're
Bring
practically
it back.
2 months ahead right now.
I'm sorry. I jumped the gun.
It's
I
cool.
have ADHD. I just gotta say it.
We can kind of like talk about it and brush up on it later on. It's not too big of a deal, but at least for the prequel trilogy, George Lucas himself, we can all agree that the writing could have been better. Correct? Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. You think, Josh? You think that his writing was A1, like it was top to bottom, damn near delectable?
Yeah. Other than Jar Jar Binks, yeah. A good 99% of the time, yeah.
I think the writing might have been good. The execution was what was lacking.
Oh, so you think it was the actors? We think that Natalie
I'm
Portman's
not necessarily the actors, but I think that the pacing is off. That's my issue.
Oh, the pacing. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing against the actors. Like, I do think the story is fine. It's more just like the execution within the context of like the movies. Not like the actors did it as well as they could with the material that they're given. They're handed, right? You can't really blame an actor for something like they only have a minor portion in considering all the extra work that goes into something in a movie, like the art and the production, all that stuff is. There's a reason the credits are so long, right? Like the actors may be at the top, but there's thousands of other people that go into making something come together like that.
Yeah. Background actors, people in mocap for the aliens. You got all kinds of people on those sets. So I guess like another big question that kind of divides the fan base before we completely just start dipping into these movies is how do you say it? The CGI, right? We kind of touched up on it. We know that the CGI was kind of paving the way, but a lot of people say that they're just eyesores now. Like it's just not working in today's date. They need an update, or we need another trilogy as great as the prequel trilogy. That's what people say on Twitter. That's what I hear. Whatever your guys' favorite trilogy, we'll probably get to that with the Force Unscripted, but let us know down in the comments what you guys think out there.
Yeah.
But for the Force Unscripted, what did you guys think about the CGI in these movies? Do you guys think that they're an eyesore now? Do you marvel at the CGI efficiency that these movies showed?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said like, think about them at the time that they came out. Like, yeah, groundbreaking stuff. And I think that when you're talking about specifically the CGI, you have to look at them in the scope of the time that they came out, which is like, like you also have to view the original trilogy in the same way because, practical effects as opposed to CGI of the prequel. So I think when you look at them in the time that they came out, absolutely groundbreaking, fantastic. It looked good. I mean, it was one of the things that kept me into it was like seeing the armies of the droids and seeing a character like Jar Jar, like, oh, this dude is kind of goofy, but he looks really cool. I think if you look at them, like comparing them to what we have now, like, these are little pieces of shit, right? But in the time that they came out, definitely great. It doesn't even bother me watching them again today. Like I said, I rewatched them about a month or so ago and still love them. I probably love them more than I did as a kid, if I'm being completely honest with you. But you still see the cringe aspect of a movie starting to get dated when it comes to the technology of that movie.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think the only one to suffer from like development hell of CGI is probably the second one.
Okay.
I think the first one, he does a good mixture of keeping it practical and CGI and the important bits, I guess. And then the second one, that one was has heavy CGI characters and stuff. And then, I think he kind of perfected it with the third one. And, that came out when everybody was using CGI. But I think that second one was where the printer hit the jam button. Like,
he just expanded too much, apparently. What about you, Winchy? What are your thoughts on the CGI and looking back at it now?
Even looking back at it now, and even if we're talking about what you say is probably the worst one, which is the second, like I've seen movies and shows and whatnot in recent times that still have worse CGI, right? Like it may have been, like looking back on some of it, yeah, some of the characters do look a little wonky and whatnot, but I've seen way worse in way newer stuff, with even like bigger budgets. And so what that tells me is that like, yeah, they may have been pushing, the limits, trying to, set like a whatever kind of records in their heads, that kind of thing, right? Like push what can be done, but also they didn't go so far as to make it bad. Like, yeah, maybe episode 2 has some wonky stuff in it, but if you think like the entire clone army is CGI, the entire droid army is CGI, except for like, the few times where they take off their helmets and it's Tamara Morrison. But like the rest of it, like that looked good. And even seeing clones in newer stuff where they're not CGI, I sometimes still prefer the CGI clones. Now they all look the same, so copying and pasting some of that stuff may not be as hard as like individual aliens and whatnot.
Yeah.
But talking like even though Jar Jar isn't like the most loved character, the CGI on him is crazy. Like it's really, really good.
Yeah,
for a 1999 film.
That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
He knew how to
even
pick and choose like what looked good.
Yeah, because that's one thing that that's one of those things they say, like the Phantom Menace, Jar Jar holds up 1999, right?
Yeah.
You can look at movies nowadays like Man of Steel. 10 years later, it still looks pretty damn good. So a lot of people go back to this, or I guess we can just hit the worst offender, which is Attack of the Clones, and they just like, this shit just is what the fuck? Like this is dog shit. Like why who said we're gonna go ahead and put a 4-armed alien in the budget when we ain't got the budget for it, So I do think as CGI goes, I'm pretty sure we can all agree that the second one's the worst offender. It's just
they tried too much. They expanded.
They went from this minuscule scope.
Yeah.
And George Lucas was like, I'm just gonna bust it wide open.
Yeah. And
we said, no, Lucas, put it away, and he was like, no, we're gonna do it.
The third one refined it, I think, but the second one was trying to do a lot of things too quickly. I think he should have just focused more on doing practical stuff and mixing in the CGI, and that probably would have helped the second one a long way.
Okay, all right. So we can kind of agree on those things, but I want to start getting into these movies. I know the Force Unscripted kind of ran down a little bit of their do's and don'ts for the movies, but I'm gonna just go ahead and start kicking it off. So the Phantom Menace, all right? The name is super fitting for what it is, in my opinion. It came out in 1999, a big hiatus from the OG trilogy. I know a lot of people were excited. I, for one, was not old enough to be in that group, okay? I wasn't there for the excitement, but when I did finally, get around to watching it the first time, fucking blew the dust off the cassette. Mm-hmm. It was VHS at the time, all right? Blew it off, put that bitch in there. Had to rewind it first because obviously you got to rewind it, make sure it's all the way in the beginning. Press play, and it just wowed me. I think I didn't start with the OG trilogy as I was growing up. I started from the first one and went my way down, and the first one had a great, how you said, mix between practicality, CGI. Jar Jar was, as annoying as he is one of those top-notch characters that will never be forgotten because of the fact. I mean, people are still making up theories about Darth Jar Jar is a thing that people are still bringing up till this day, regardless. That final battle in space with, Anakin destroying that whole space station was a great feat to have in 1999. The fight between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Maul and Liam Neeson obviously is going to be top tier one of the top tier fight scenes in all of Star Wars. And I know a lot of people don't like the whole pod racing thing, but I thought that was great. And he's seen the behind the scenes behind it, and knowing that they actually built these race cars or whatever, pod race, whatever. They built it just to destroy them and put that on screen for practicality's sake. 100% chef's kiss. Josh, what do you think about the Phantom Menace?
I think it's a good movie. I really I obviously wasn't old enough to enjoy that one. I wasn't old enough to enjoy the second or third one. More on that later. But I think when I actually did get around to watching this, I thought it was boring at first. I was like, all these people talking, this is insane. And then I was old enough to appreciate the when I got old enough to appreciate the actual what was going on, politics, the Jedi and things like that. I remember thinking like, this is a really good movie. And then I fell in love with the actual, the end fight scene with Darth Maul and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn. I remember that being the standing out point. I know that's probably everybody's standing out point, but man, when I first seen it, it was everything to me. So I think it still holds up. It's a good movie.
Okay. High regards. What about you, Nikita? What I know you gave us a little bit earlier, but what pros, cons? What'd you think about the first one?
I think that as far as the prequel trilogy goes, Phantom Menace is definitely one of the best as far as thematic Star Wars goes, and that comes from a lot of reasons. The biggest thing that came out of like episode 1, in my opinion, in regards to the entirety of like Star Wars as a whole, is Duel of the Fates. And one, amazing job by John Williams for just the overall composition of that song. But I feel like as far as thematic Star Wars goes, it's like it's the focal point of that movie, because the Duel of the Fates being, this is Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one, and what happens in this Duel of the Fates is going to be, completely and utterly tied into the course of the chosen one. So like, sure, they in the fight of Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan versus Darth Maul, like the light side wins the battle, but the dark side wins the war, right? So like in the Duel of the Fates, the fate where Anakin has to go through this grand downfall, be the end of the Jedi Order, basically, is what comes to fruition because Qui-Gon, the person who would have been best to guide this small boy to Jedi knighthood, to be the actual savior of the Jedi, the chosen one, dies, and then we lose the Duel of Fates. Like that's because of Qui-Gon's death. The Duel of Fates is lost, and now Anakin is doomed on this path where he has to become Darth Vader and destroy, the Jedi Order. I think that's what makes episode 1 such a beautiful movie. Again, I absolutely loved Liam Neeson being cast as Qui-Gon. I think he did a great job. There's always a bigger fish. That's like one of my favorite quotes from that movie. I think that's one of Hunter's favorite quotes from that movie too. And I think as far as like setting the pace for how we get to this, this black clad caped figure in episode 4 is all dependent on the events of episode 1. And that's why I love episode 1.
Okay.
Very good.
Yep. Next.
Pros, cons for episode 1. Pros, obviously, is the Duel of Fates. I mean, I still get like chills even when just the music comes on. But I enjoy, I like spaceships. I like that kind of stuff. I really love the Naboo starfighters, the N1s. They're awesome. I loved the pod racing. I still enjoy watching the pod race. I don't know. I didn't even realize people really didn't like that. Honestly, because I thought the pod race was a really great, well shot scene, with like real senses of danger for the participants. I didn't hate Jar Jar. I think Jar Jar, of all of the Gungans, Jar Jar was my favorite. But I really didn't like the Gungan monarchy or whatever they were, whatever kind of government it was. They just felt annoying to me and like cowards. Even still do. So I didn't really appreciate that. I did love that when the Gungans actually went to war. I love the way they fought because I thought it was silly, but it ended up working out in their favor. Um, but yeah, I really enjoyed the spaceships, the cool tech, that kind of thing. I didn't necessarily love some of like the characters. So I would say pros are like the tech, the sci-fi aspect of it, and cons would probably be some of the like goofiness.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense. I mean, the Gungans weren't like they were never really like a talking point. You know what I mean? Like underwater species make sense, but they aren't what I imagine. And the fact that one of them that's kind of a fumbling dummy makes it to the Senate and all that, you know what I mean? Like it's really weird how that works out. And I know the Clone Wars, like the show, like gave them their props. I think there's like a whole arc with them, right? They like take down General Grievous. Like you'd never expect that from this kind of race.
Yeah.
But to me, I never found them interesting. Even Jar Jar Binks, like I don't know, found them silly.
Gungans, yeah. Those are the throwaway species. I think that a lot of people don't give enough credit. But to what you were saying about the pod racing, now from a film perspective, the pod racing scene doesn't make sense to a lot of people. Okay, because when this movie came out, people were like, the son of Vader, or not the son of Vader, the Vader as a child, and his upcoming, and what kind of hardship did he go through, whatever. And when it comes down to the pod racing aspect, that a lot of people, at least from a film perspective, were hoping for him to fail to make the pod racing kind of a not such a wasted moment, because when you have a scene that is supposed to teach this kid that he isn't all powerful, until they kind of play on that until Attack of the Clones, and then that's when you start seeing that he wants to gain that power to save him. But he was just able to beat the pod racing like nothing, right? Obviously they showed some kind of struggle in between, but at the end of it, they didn't really lay down foundation for him to lose. And for a character that always wins, there's no stakes behind it. So that's why the pod racing scene is kind of panned in a filmmaking aspect.
Can I make a counterpoint? I don't want to be the guy that's like, like the book is better than the movie, right? But
I mean, hey, you're the Star Wars expert here. I'm just here on the film side.
So yeah, a lot of my Star Wars knowledge does come from all the books that I've read. And the reason why I actually enjoy the fact that Anakin doesn't lose that race is because, like, you got to think in the scheme of Star Wars, this is basically Force baby Jesus, right? Like, no father, born, like, conceived through Shmi Skywalker and literally the Force. Like, this guy is showing, like, I'm a 9-year-old, I'm fighting, or I'm racing in a competition where humans don't race because they're just so unevolved compared to these other alien species that they don't have the reflexes to. And here's this 9-year-old tapping into the Force in ways that, like, basically only Qui-Gon can really see, and using that to his advantage as a 9-year-old with no training, being able to beat, people who are not only like evolutionarily like designed to beat the shit out of him in this competition, but also are cheating to try to beat this little kid. I like that part. I like that aspect. But you don't see all of that from the movie, right? Because, like, I feel like a lot of people who have just seen Star Wars and not read the books don't know anything that, like, Anakin is channeling the Force to be able to know what button he needs to press, what lever he needs to disengage or engage to, like, get around this person, to navigate this pass that humans shouldn't have the reaction times. I love that part. That's Star Wars to me, because he's showing, like, we know that, like, Vader is just preternaturally stronger than everyone else in the Force except for, like, Palpatine at the time, right? And so, like, seeing that as a 9-year-old, he still has this predisposition to just be so inordinately in communion with the Force. I love that aspect. That's just me, though.
Plus, he was, like the best starfighter pilot in the galaxy for a very long time until Luke, and maybe even still was better than Luke. So, and he's a child prodigy, right? And you don't typically see child prodigies like getting that failure kind of like redemption arc thing until later when they are like a little more developed and like can like emotionally deal with something like that. Like you don't see a lot of child prodigies failing when they're 9 years old. You see them failing when they're like 17 or 18, entering the adult world, and they realize that like things aren't all sunshine and rainbows, that kind of thing. So I don't think it's a bad thing that he didn't lose. I mean, it, he was.
I
He
mean, because
was.
like what you just said happens. Like, you know, he
Yeah.
does fail in like his late teens.
Right. Exactly. Like I think that was fine.
Okay, yeah, just from that, I guess bringing in that film perspective, they just, I guess a lot of people felt like that scene was pointless, and even adding on to the tail end that he was able to destroy the battleship, and yeah, there's all that, you know, as Star Wars fans, we know and we understand he's tapping into the Force.
Yeah.
We understand that he's doing things that not normal human beings
but
can
from
do.
the outside looking in, it's just like, this is boring.
Like, yeah, he's just a kid
He's
that can
racing.
do it
Like,
all.
this is ridiculous.
Yeah, without any explanation, which leads me to my next point when it comes to, you know, people hating it from a film aspect, and maybe from the Star Wars community as well, was the introduction of midichlorians. So they try to explain all that by saying that he has midichlorians within his bloodstream, and that's how, you know, obviously he has the Force and all that you know, mumbo jumbo, whatever. They by the what do we think about the midichlorians first? They fine addition to the Star Wars universe,
I
or
think
would it
so.
have been better to feel like it was the Force coming from the Earth, and only some people can train themselves in that art?
No, I
So
think. No, go ahead.
yeah, okay, so like everyone has everyone is the Force is a part of everything and everyone. So like the midichlorians are just like a physicalized at a microscopic level um way to explain how like the Force is connecting everything. Everything has some form of like midichlorians in them,
Yeah,
right? Like
it's a
that
way to measure,
whatever.
I guess.
Right, exactly. And since he was like a child of the Force, literally, the fact that he has more midichlorians makes sense because like half or more of his DNA is literally midichlorian. And so like it's just a way to give a physical like appearance to the Force so that you can explain like he didn't have a dad, but it's still in his DNA kind of thing. And so I don't think it's like yes, it's a little bit of, you know, sci-fi magic, but there has to be some amount of hand wavium in like all of these like sci-fi things because again, it's magic, right? Like it's the Force is magic essentially, right? It's there has to be some amount of hand wavium. You, you have to explain away some things. It's just not possible to give like a scientific, you know, explanation for every single thing that makes sense to everybody. No matter what like the genre or like the medium is, like it's sci-fi, there's a reason it's fiction.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people, you know, we say this on our podcast all the time, but a lot of people like to be spoon-fed information.
Yeah.
A lot of people like to be, you know, in the movies, from the movie buff perspective, a lot of people like to be fed that information, reassured that this is exactly what's happening. And I guess from a film perspective, it just didn't reach that. It didn't reach that mark for a lot of people, according to the Rotten Tomatoes score,
Yeah.
As, according to the critics. We know that, but they don't know that, and I think that's what really hurts this. I guess the movie as a movie. I guess as a Star Wars fan, we know the backstory. We know what, you know, what goes into those scenes. It's just it kind of undoes the movie if you don't know what's happening.
And see, I actually agree with you guys on that. I think that the midichlorian thing could have been completely left out of the movies and been something that they like put into the books. But just as someone who has read, so like there's 174 novels, I believe, for the Legends timeline, and I've read about like 80 to 85% of them. And basically in that small little span, like between the timing of like episode 1 and episode 3 is literally the only time, even in like the book timeline of Star Wars, that they really only ever talk of that's the only time they really mention midichlorians. When Luke is like restarting the Jedi Order, he he doesn't do anything about midichlorians. He touches the back of their neck, and like if he gets a kickback, then he's like, ah, yes, you have the Force. They don't even like reference it in the books all that often. I think it was uh like an unnecessary point for the movies. I think that there are other ways that you can be like, oh yeah, this child has no father and is stronger in the Force naturally than Yoda without having to say, oh yeah, his midichlorian count is over 20,000. Like, what does that mean to me? So what is Yoda's midichlorian count? They never say that. Like, I don't have any like frame of reference here. So like, I think that the midichlorian part could have been left out of the movies, personally speaking.
Yeah, because then I mean, without explanation, they just were like, yeah, she's married. She had a baby without any father or nothing like that, and they were just like, yeah, the reason we can explain that is midichlorians. There's midichlorians there, obviously, and we all agreed the CGI to practical, the effects were pretty good in this movie, correct?
I think so.
I think we already discussed that, so we can all agree there. Writing could have been done better, right? Except for you think the writing's good, Josh.
Yeah,
but for the unscripted over there.
Yeah, no, we're on the same page there.
Yeah, we're on the same page. Yeah,
all right, for sure. So, before we move on to episode 2, now, this is all a personal score. We're gonna just rank this from 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, 5 being in the middle, and you put into whatever you want into play into the number that you give for this for the Phantom Menace. This rating will not affect the overall ranking when we get to that on Star Wars Day, but this is just to kind of measure our nostalgia and what we love about the movie and all that. So I'll go off first. The Phantom Menace is obviously a good entry point for some people, and for some people, no. I can acknowledge with context, this movie's great. Without context, you don't have a lot going for it. I know people say a lot of the issues come from pacing as well, aka the whole politics aspect of this movie. And though some things can be boring, unless you're super interested in the Star Wars universe like how we are, I can acknowledge the fact that it's not going to be the same for everybody. Some people are going to desire more. Mm-hmm. With that being said, with my nostalgia factor playing in there and all that, I got to give this movie like a solid 7. It's not the best made film out there, in my opinion, but I love Star Wars. I think it's great and it does what it needs to do. Do I wish there was more to context so more people could love it? Yes, but since there's not, it is what it is. But Josh, go ahead and then we'll pass it on to them.
This movie, I mean, I think it's good, and obviously, that's from a real fan perspective. But I wouldn't show someone this movie to like get them into Star Wars.
Oh, this isn't the one that you'd be like, let me show you Star Wars.
Yeah, no. I can acknowledge that it is too slow. It does have its moments, and while I can totally hype up the ending, no one's gonna want to sit through another hour for an hour and a half just to see a cool fight. You know what I mean? Not most people, anyway. I even acknowledging all that, despite the good dialogue, in my opinion, and all the characters writing for it, I'd give it like a 7 out of 10.
7?
Yeah.
7. So double 7s over here from the Film Bros. What about the Force Unscripted, Nikita, Winchie, whoever wants to start it off?
I'll let you start off, Winchie. Go ahead.
I agree that if this were the very first movie in Star Wars that I had ever watched, or in general somebody had ever watched, I don't know if they would continue watching Star Wars. It's definitely not the one I would show everyone. I would, you know what? I would give it a 6.5. Maybe even a 6. Like, it's a good movie. But I wouldn't even rate it as high as you guys did, even from like a Star Wars loving standpoint. Just like, I also get bored in some parts. Like, if I had the option to skip portions of the movie and only watch the stuff that I wanted to watch, I would skip a good chunk of it. So I don't hate the movie, but I wouldn't even rate it as high as you guys did.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I feel you on that one. 100%. What about you, Nikita?
See, I'm on the same boat as Winchie for this one, even though he and I argue a lot about Star Wars. I'm definitely, I think my number is 6. I think very strong opening as far as Star Wars movies are concerned. Like the scene where you just it's Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon just already in the thick of it, right? I think very strong opening scene, and then as you mentioned, very strong closing too with the fight and everything, and the Jedi wondering like, oh, what is this? You know, the rule of two. You know, like there's always a master and the apprentice. So which one did we kill, the master or the apprentice, right? But I think the middle and the pacing weaken the movie, even though strong opening, strong closing. So my rating is definitely 6 for this one.
There you go. That makes sense.
Okay. All right. So you guys are on the same page. We're on the same page. I think I can agree with you guys as well. I think depending on where your love is for this movie, I know Josh said that he wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend it only for the final the Duel of Fates. Obviously, I think I'd be like, watch it on YouTube. That's gonna really attract you into this universe. So I think we can all agree the Phantom Menace isn't the strongest, but you know, my love for Star Wars really, Darth Maul especially, like if he adds any points for me, it's like at least 5. Like they're 100%.
Yeah.
I feel that. Like if I was not a Star Wars fan, like solid 4, maybe 3.5, honestly.
Probably if I wasn't a Star Wars fan, I think it dropped to maybe below a 5. It had to be like a 4 or something, 4.5. If I wasn't a Star Wars fan.
Well, yeah. I mean, we got investment in these characters at that point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say I fell in love at first sight with Darth Maul. So I think regardless, it went up. I think what made me really interested in the universe would have, like, that was the character that made me be like, where the fuck did this guy come from?
Imagine, like, growing up with this franchise, right? And then, 1999 comes around, you're just a fan. You're like, holy shit, they're making another one. This is supposed to predate everything. You're watching the movie. You see the Jedi finally pull out their lightsabers, and then you lose your shit because there's a double-bladed red saber. Like, imagine the hype there.
Yeah, that has
and the casting for Ray Park as Darth Maul was also fantastic. Like dude was in his bag the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, and today, we don't talk about today, but yeah, back then Ray Park was he was the guy, but today he's on a different plane. You guys know what happened to him, right? Out of curiosity.
No, actually.
Well, I don't want to ruin Star Wars for anybody, but apparently he was up on Instagram and he showed his wang out there.
Oh my god.
Oh.
So and he deleted it quick. So
Okay, question. Does he have a double-bladed wang?
I was about to say, like, we got to talk about his saber then,
God,
it's a discussion point now. But yeah, so I mean, Ray Park is obviously, I thought he was perfect, and then to even know that he came back to do the mocap suit for the Clone Wars finale and all that, like, that it blew my mind. And then I heard what he did, and I was just like, damn it, man, we almost had you back in live action, almost. So we'll see down the road if that actually happens. I mean, he kind of bit the dust in Rebels, but we're moving on here. So, Attack of the Clones. Obviously, we already ran down the CGI. I think we can all agree it has the worst CGI. Writing doesn't get any better, but something that I love about this movie, I think Nikita said it, but the world building aspect was amazing. They really went from 0 to 100 in this one. Still upset they deleted that whole Mace Windu cutting off Jango Fett's arm and everything, but what we got was cool for what we got. The clones, I know they're all CGI. Some people say that is fake, but to be honest, that scene where they're shooting each other and then like that the dust just kind of swells them all up because the ships are being shot down. Like, that scene is cool. The politics were thrown to the side in this one, though it still played a part. They didn't shine a light so heavily like they did in the Phantom Menace, so it really helped with, I guess, the pacing and the action. Dialogue was okay. I think the most heartbreaking moment was obviously with Anakin and his mother, and then Padme just was like, "Hey, you psychopath, come here."
Yeah.
And by the end of it, I don't have too many gripes. Josh, what do you think about Attack of the Clones?
It's okay. Like, I think this one's an alright movie. The action is alright. It sets up a lot of things for episode 3 that I kind of enjoy. I actually enjoy the small aspects of Anakin and Padme's relationship here, as questionable as it is. I like Obi-Wan on his own solo mission here. I think it really also solidifies the whole Master and Padawan thing, and how much they actually clash, Anakin and Obi-Wan, not just here but in the third one, despite being Master and Apprentice and having that brotherly bond.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is. I think this one just suffers from really bad CGI. And as much as I like the combat, it's not all that flashy either. I think again it does have a really good ending, ending battle, but other than that, I think it's just an average movie.
Okay, all right. What about you, Nikita Winchie?
So as far as everything is, I feel like the jump between 1 and 2 is the only one that you're missing information, but it's information that can be inferred. Like, because in 1 they talk about Anakin hasn't been trained, from like a baby. He's 9 years old. He already has attachment emotion, so it's going to cause issues. So like when you see the jump to 2, when he's in his teenage years, you're like, okay, rebellious teen phase, that makes sense. Like, I wish I had more context about how he went from being a good boy to like a slightly unlistening teenager. But then you're like, all teenagers are like this, right? So it kind of makes sense. And I think that it left me once I watched episode 2, I didn't have as many questions towards the end of it. I was like, okay, this kind of makes sense. I don't understand why there's this big age disparity between these two characters, and they're getting married, but yeah, okay, sure. I think that it does a great job at setting up the downfall that we experience in 3. The CGI, I agree, a little over the top. This is definitely the one where I like the political aspect of it more than any other Star Wars movie. Too, you really kind of get to see the developing intricacies of the Galactic Senate, Palpatine now sort of at the reins, and the Jedi trying to figure out what the fuck is going on in the galaxy. But I still rate this one lower than I rate Phantom Menace. I think most of us kind of have that same analysis of the movie. I think there are good aspects, of course the seismic charge sound. I do like parts of the Battle of Geonosis, but what lives in my head rent free when I think about this movie is, and this was one of the ones that I saw in the theaters, is the uproar and great scream that everyone basically let out of their mouth at the end when Yoda finally pulls out his lightsaber and goes hard against Dooku, and you're just like, holy shit, this is the lightsaber fight that I've always wanted to see. I've always wanted to see Grandmaster fucking Yoda get down with the stand on business here, fight the bad people. Red means bad, so Yoda goes ham against the red guy. And that's what lives rent free of the movie, because I always loved Yoda as a character, from the OG trilogy, and so finally getting to see this small motherfucker hippity hoppity all over the fucking battle scene, I loved it, and that is what holds this movie up for me. I think everything else is kind of subpar in that aspect. If I had to give this one a number rating, I'd probably
hold that thought. Hold it there. We ain't there yet, but we appreciate your enthusiasm. We appreciate it. What about let's give it up to Winchie just a little bit.
Yeah.
What'd you think about Attack of the Clones, Winchie?
Mando good.
Word?
Me like Django Fett. So Nikita, the part with Yoda is definitely one of my favorite parts of the movie. Seeing the little green man hippity hoppity is fantastic, especially knowing that he does that using the Force. He animates his muscles, like his whole body. The way he moves like that is not because he can move like that. It's because he's using the Force to like actually move his limbs and whatnot. Which is why he walks around with a cane most of the time. Like he's actually old and frail. He's just that good with the Force. But my favorite part of the movie is the fight between Django and Obi-Wan on Kamino. I love watching somebody who has no lightsaber, no Force powers, none of that stuff go toe to toe with a very powerful, Jedi Knight and come out maybe not necessarily on top, but like unscathed. I love that part. I love Kamino, like the whole sequence on Kamino. I enjoy. Um, I don't really care about the politics that much. They're just like I said, world building aspects. They're great. Like they set the stage, but and like the romance, I could not care less about the romance between Anakin and Padme. But I do enjoy like I said, the sci-fi aspects of the movies more than the dialogue and that kind of stuff. So I mean, those are the parts that I'm going to focus on: taking down the trade unions, command modules for their spaceships with lasers and whatnot, and watching the dust clouds like roll as the giant like spheres crash into Geonosis. Like that stuff is awesome to me.
Okay. Yeah.
I enjoy that.
Yeah. That's all great. I think the best part about that whole Yoda and Count Dooku fight, I like 100%. I know a lot of people were like scratching their heads when they were like, Yoda can do that shit. But it was so cool to see on screen that people would just accepted it. They're just like, hey, fuck it. Like, this guy can do that. They didn't even worry about the Force or anything like that. And that's where I kind of like lingered my mind when I was watching it for the first time. But I thought it was just cool that people were just, as a collective, were like, that shit's cool. We don't give a shit about the specifics. Like, you did something so fucking hardcore. I thought that's great.
Like, this is where Anakin loses his hand.
Yeah, exactly. That as well. And then, Yoda just picks up a whole pillar. It's insane. Gripes about the movie that is universal is, one, Anakin's acting in this film. And to add into that mix, how you guys were saying, the whole chemistry between Padme and Anakin. Those were like, I think that was like the worst offender. Talking about it, like Phantom Menace, I think the pod racing one and the midichlorians were like that. Attack of the Clones, it was these two things. These two things were like the biggest eyesores for people.
Yeah.
Anakin's acting, Hayden Christensen's acting, and Natalie Portman's acting, and their chemistry on screen together, which I could admit it was kind of like, damn, they really want to fuck. Why aren't they doing that? Like that. But you got to understand, this is a PG-13 movie.
Yeah.
You can't really do that. George Lucas was like, well, this is a space opera, not a porno. So he was like, well, that's not gonna happen. But he played it so coy. I think it's what when she said was that they could have did away with that altogether. But then it just makes it more of a problem when they're like, yeah, this, he has this love relationship pulled to her that he can't have, and he's just conflicted, and it just, I don't know, the execution was just bad in my opinion as well. I can agree with the gripes when it comes to that aspect. What do you think, Josh?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of the acting in this movie also kind of suffered from everybody involved, because even as great as Ewan McGregor is, I think his performance suffers a bit here too. Obviously, you mentioned Hayden Christensen. I think Padme is probably the only one to like hold up her end here, regardless of how cringy like the lines are. CGI again. I just keep touching up on it because it I can't just not get over it. You know what I mean? Maybe not enough action. Maybe I'm tripping about that, but I don't think there was enough here. Not as much as the third one gave us, but obviously a lot more than what the first one gave us.
Well, I mean, I feel like they saved a lot of it for that final act.
Yeah.
So,
and then I like that it was also, again, this one just sets up a lot what the third one does. So it's kind of like just a stepping stone, in my opinion, just to get us to where we need to be, because it shows us Anakin dipping into his dark side tendencies. You know, slaughters a whole camp of raiders for his mom, and then cries about it to Padme. So I think it just sets up a lot of that, but at the same time, it also doesn't really do much as a movie for itself other than set up the finale.
Yeah, it's just a genocide warm up.
Yeah, basically.
First a bunch of desert people, then a bunch of kids. Fuck them kids.
Yeah, that's basically it. That's basically it. Do you guys agree with that as well? The whole chemistry between them. We know dialogue was bad. They did what they could, but you think Hayden Christensen could have upped up his? Because even then, Obi-Wan wasn't even that big of a gripe. I think the worst offenders was Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman, more specifically them together.
I think, personally, you don't know enough about what Anakin is going through. Like, they show you, like, I think that's when you get the first glimpse of, like, the night terrors and the visions and stuff because of his mom on Tatooine. But yeah, you said it like absolutely perfectly. It was like, this is really just a stepping stone movie, honestly. There are great parts about it, but for all intents and purposes, it's just context between 1 and 3, which I feel like are the better movies in the aspect of the prequel trilogies.
Yeah.
Okay. You share that as well, Winchie?
Yeah, it's really just meant to show us like how the Clone Wars got kicked off and then their part in it, and like, yeah, it sets the stage for showing like Anakin's fear of losing people, because through the nightmares, which basically predicted what would happen to his mom. He knows that like the things that he sees in his dreams lead to bad outcomes, and they can come true. And then we see like him becoming attached to Padme, so we know that like in later on, like if he's having nightmares about Padme, probably gonna come true, kind of thing. So we see like the beginning of that fear. There's definitely that storytelling aspect of it. Yeah, the dialogue is a little cringe. Some of that, like, they're given a script, so some of that dialogue isn't on them necessarily. Like, maybe they did it as best as they could given the lines that they were given. Actors are given some leeway to like improvise and whatnot, but not, they do at the end of the day have like a story to tell that they're given. So some of that is on the writing team.
The writing aspect can be on the production crew and whatever, but I mean, if your actors aren't acting and have chemistry together, that is an actor's failure.
Well, I'm getting there.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah. Like, let's not say like some of it is on the dialogue, sure, but like, you can yeah, maybe Anakin's an awkward teenager or whatever, but there is also the like, there's just not a lot of like, you can't feel like a like love between them that you feel in some like romance movies, even movies that aren't romance. Like,
yeah,
you don't get that like that connection between the two of them, and yeah, some of that is on their acting, some of it's on kind of just like what was handed to them.
Yeah,
but,
we're not
definitely,
we're not watching like Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield like relationship type.
Yeah, no.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So before we give our rating, just a couple more, tad more things that people had some gripes on. Another thing, and now that we have context in it, maybe it's a little bit different today, and that's why I kind of want to get the take on it. But a lot of people, I know it's as cool as I believe when she said this was the Boba Fett and the Obi-Wan fight.
Yeah.
But they didn't really answer a lot of questions and left a lot of threads from that. I mean, by the end of it, he wound up cutting his head off. Mace Windu wound up cutting his head off and everything. Boba was there. You don't really see them anymore. Now we have that context with the Clone Wars and, Revenge of the Sith. So I would say when I first watched it, it was kind of my gripe too. Nowadays, I'm just like, well, at least we got that context and, but in a film perspective, they don't really dive into that, nor do they follow that up within any other film. You would have to go to the spin-off of that is the Clone Wars series, or watch the Boba Fett show if you really are inclined to, try to get through Mando 2.0. What do you think about that?
Well, not just that, like they name drop Darth Tyrannus, right? And like we don't get confirmation that that's Count Dooku until the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine just watching it, you're like, what the fuck is that? Like, we just had to assume it's a bad guy that isn't Darth Maul. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just another thing in the shadows. So yeah, I see what you're saying, because it does do a lot, and then the third one doesn't really answer those questions either.
Yeah, but from a film perspective,
Yeah.
What about you, Nikita? What do you think?
From a film perspective, I think it does an absolute shit job at filling any gaps you want to know. I think that is like I feel like outside of the OG trilogy, that is a thing that like the prequel and the sequel trilogy share, is like the gaps. If you don't do any other like side research, if you just do like only do the movies, you're just like, what the fuck am I missing, man? And then like, yeah, you can fill those gaps with novels, with side series, but as a movie by themselves, yeah, it leaves a lot of questions unanswered, which again is what I say. Like when we get to 3, I'm just like, what the fuck happened?
Yeah, it's true. That is true. What about you, Winchi? You share that, or what do you think?
There's definitely a lot of missing pieces. There's definitely a lot of gaps that needed to be filled. I don't necessarily know that the Darth Tyrannus bit was one of the ones that was like too in need of being filled, just because at the time we didn't know who the Sith master was. We knew that there was a master and an apprentice. But we didn't know who the master was, so we could maybe assume that it was the master or the new apprentice. It didn't really matter. What it was more meant to show was that like there is an aspect of mystery here. Like we know that a master Sifo-Dyas commissioned the clones to be produced, but we don't know who he was. I think we're just meant to look at those things and think like there's definitely some fucky business going on in the back. Now there's plenty of other aspects of this that like we have so much gap, like what the hell happened. But I think that one in particular was just meant to show you that like, hey, there's something going on that not even the characters, like none of these characters know about, and you're not going to know about for a while, at least till the next movie, hopefully, if you're watching it at the time, right? That like is trying to show you that there's some people working from in the background who are doing some fucky shit, and so like keep an eye on that. But I don't think that's meant to be like the one of the takeaways is like why didn't they explain this kind of thing.
Well, I think I think I kind of disagree with, and this is the little pushback, is that you didn't necessarily need to know, because I think the film, after watching it a lot of times, I think that it really tries to allude that Palpatine is Lord Tyrannus. I think that's where they were trying to make it seem at the time, and then completely when the Clone Wars came out, they were like, well, what if we make Count Dooku a double agent?
Yeah.
And have him have done that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they were really trying to allude at the time that it was supposed to be Emperor Palpatine.
I mean, with a name like Tyrannus, you would think that, because like you think like Tyrannosaurus Rex, like big dog, right? But
I was more down the vein of like tyrant, but yeah.
Oh, see, I immediately thought dinosaur. I was like, big head, little arms. He has
old,
to have everyone else do it for him. I don't think that
old. Oh, wait, he's kind of old. He's kind of old.
I think, well, even then, because we know he's just been pulling the strings from behind the scenes, and obviously, if you watch the movies, you know that name doesn't add up at all. So it's really just a random name drop.
Yeah, that I felt a lot of audiences could have associated it and was leaning towards a different thing. So that's why I kind of feel, from a film perspective, they kind of messed up even dropping that name, because it seemed like they were trying to allude to something that wasn't really the truth. And then they kind of just were like, well, it's just a throwaway line anyways, and walked away.
And then, Clone Wars comes along, and we're just like, oh, it's Count Dooku.
I was like Leo in the chair. I was like,
yeah.
Like Tyrannus, I know who that was.
to also like, okay, they name drop Tyrannus, but then almost like a couple, like not even like 2 scenes later, we see the very next bad guy that shows up on the screen, which is Dooku. And like, I know people like stuff to be spoon fed to them, but like, come on, like they're like, oh, this guy named Darth Tyrannus hired me, and then I flew to the planet where the bad guy is. I wonder who Darth Tyrannus is.
Boom, Count Dooku. Yeah,
Expecting a lot of from the audience is kind of like harsh in itself too, because yeah, people like to be spoon fed, and if you're telling us this guy's name is Count Dooku, they're gonna be like, that's Count Dooku. Who the fuck is Darth Tyrannus?
yeah,
Like a movie goer, you know what I mean? Not us, obviously.
yeah. Because we, like I said, we're giving that perspective of like, as a Star Wars fan and people that love this, and I've actually done some digging about it myself. So I kind of have that backstory, but taking the movie at face value, I can see where general audiences would get confused. People that aren't into the lore and all that.
A lot of people would see the plans for the Death Star and be like, "What the fuck is that?" You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
While Star Wars fans would be like, "Holy shit, that is a big ass Easter egg!" Like they were planning this at the beginning of the Clone Wars type shit.
They're like, "When is that toy gonna be put into effect?" Literally, you got to watch movies from the fucking 80s. Any pushback on that one or nothing?
No, I'm completely on the train with you guys on this one.
Yeah,
if you haven't watched the original trilogy and you're coming in to watch episode 2, like, yeah, I would get that you wouldn't associate Darth Tyrannus with Count Dooku. But if you have watched the OG trilogy and you know that like Sith users had a different Darth name than their actual name, then I think it would be fairly easy for you to put 2 and 2 together there. So if you're a newer watcher just coming into like 1 and 2 as your start into Star Wars, then yeah, confusion, off the wall. But if you know that like Darth Vader was also Anakin Skywalker, I think it's easier to just look at that and be like, oh yeah, Darth Tyrannus, and he went running straight to the guy, and we find out that he's a bad guy. Oh, that must be Darth Tyrannus. That's his Sith name.
Yeah. Like I just think the general audiences wouldn't have picked that up at all. But I mean, I'm glad that they gave us that context, and I'm glad they made it even cooler by showing us within the Clone Wars that it was a double agent. But just for the film's sake, I think it really dropped the ball there. And the last big thing that a lot of people were like, well, WTF, was the little fall from grace that Anakin had when he decided to slaughter everybody. And then, it was just kind of brushed off like, oh, he's totally not psychotic. I guess as a general audience, they were kind of turned off by the fact that he didn't face any repercussions for slaughtering not only women, men, children, and etc., dogs even. He was like, "Fuck you, dog." Stabbed it.
Yeah.
Hey man, if I knew the ops who took out my mama, I'm going for all of them. I felt Anakin on that one. I can't really justify the children genocide in the next movie, but if I was standing there with a beam of light that could slice anything in half, and they were my ops, and they had took out my mama, nah, gloves off. You're all getting slaughtered. There's nothing you can do to me.
Basically. I mean, I for the most part, I get that.
Like, we understand, I guess, from our stance that's something that happened, and I guess critics and everything just took some question marks to the fact that he was able to do that and get away with it with no repercussion.
Well, I mean, they're meant to be like a lower life form, and I mean, no one really knew other than Padme, so
I mean, you just leave the bodies
Padme
there.
and Obi-Wan.
Let the Jawas deal with them.
Basically.
Like,
I mean, no one's
Tusken gear.
Like from a movie perspective, just looking in, you're just I think a lot of people would be like, okay, yeah, like, they murdered his mom. This should be justified. Yeah. But in a scene next, he feels remorse about it. Because I mean, he knows he just did it out of anger. So I mean, maybe it's just the fact that, well, I mean, I can totally see that. Yeah, he did it, but out of anger, and then he felt really bad about it. So for me, I'm just like, okay, well, at least he acknowledges he feels bad about it. Well, the crazy thing is, Padme isn't even like, you're fucking crazy.
She's just like, that's hot.
Yeah, she's like, I want this.
I think at the time, because this movie did come out, I believe it came out in 04, right? No, 02.
02.
Yeah, killing children was very taboo. And I think this particular gripe with this film, for us, it's kind of like the foreshadowing of what something were to happen. I think to the audience, when they heard "and children," I think that's what really made a lot of people turn. I think that was the issue.
I think either way, like, it's not like they showed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they really doubled down in the next film that we're going to talk about. But this one, at least, they didn't show it. They just kind of said it.
I don't think I get that gripe.
But
I don't see it.
I don't see it either, but this is something that, is a universal thing. What about you? I mean, I think Nikita gave his part, but Winchie?
I mean, if you kill my mama, fuck them kids. I don't care.
Fuck them kids.
Oh my god!
I love the new generation.
Like,
this is crazy.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we know that Anakin becomes the bad guy, so him doing bad guy shit, like, it makes sense, right? Yeah, he has some remorse because it's the first time he's done, at least that we've seen, bad guy shit, right? So, like, I think it's fine.
Anakin's just a mess every other Tuesday. Like,
yeah, like, okay, he's a teenager. He's got hormones raging all over the place. He's the Force Jesus. Like, he's, again, the child prodigy fall from grace era. This is the beginning of his fall from grace era. Like, that's just what it is. Yeah, he killed a lot of people. Yeah, it was really fucked up, but I mean, at some point he had to go bad.
Yeah.
And it really shows, like, he has that rage in him that Yoda and everyone in the first movie was talking about. Like,
they were like,
dangerous.
Yeah, like, be careful. Yep. Nowadays I really don't see, even looking back at it, I never really seen that gripe. I think from a film perspective, I think the only thing that I can pinpoint was that whole children thing was taboo. But then, you see what they do in the next movie, but people love the fuck out of it, so I'm not.
Where does the line go?
Yeah, where's crossing the line?
It's only human babies, Jedi babies,
right?
For the future, not Tusken Raider babies.
Yeah, it's like random Tusken Raider babies that nobody even saw on screen. Exactly. So I don't know.
Counterpoint: there is no line. Fuck them kids is all encompassing.
Word.
That's right.
Word.
Yeah,
it's a broad statement.
Actually, Jedi don't carry blasters. Psych. Today's the day. Like, it would have been. So with that, I guess it's time for our rating. I'll kick it off for us. This movie, CGI problems, relationship issues. Though I don't see that gripe that people see with Anakin's fall from grace, because seeing obviously what comes after that, and I'm one that knows what comes after that. It connects really well. It shows that there's something darker within him, and the fight scenes were top notch. Though the CGI was bad. I think they really saved it for the big set piece that was the finale, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. To this day, I will continue to enjoy it. The rest of the movie was, honestly, I think you guys are saying it the best way. It's just, that stepping stone to what's going to happen next. A solid 5. I give it a 5.
Damn, get out of my head, because I was thinking 5 also.
Yeah,
5 out of 10. Like, this movie, it's all right, and if you're watching, the whole saga, obviously, you gotta watch the second one.
Yeah,
but
or don't.
I'm gonna anticipate the third one way before I get to the second one. So, yeah, 5 out of 10. It doesn't do anything special.
Okay. Nikita?
3 for 3 on this one. 5 out of 10 for sure. It's just stepping stone. CGI. We've already mentioned that. It's just like it's more like I don't even want to say like the lore heaviest of all of them. It's just like, we need to see how Anakin has the the start of the fall. I feel like that's all episode 2 is. This is everything that's going to make your poster child blonde, like, strong in the Force, great star pilot character that you love, that's supposed to be the coming of Force Christ go and become the fucking spawn of Satan and kill everyone. So yeah, 5 out of 10 is what I'm sticking with. 3 for 3 on this one.
Okay, for sure. What about you, Winchy?
6 out of 10. Mandalorian Strike Again.
Okay, all right. He really likes that whole Django
Damn,
thing.
yeah, enough to carry it. Damn.
No, you should listen to it sounds like he's nutting every time he hears that fucking seismic charge sound. We use Discord when we talk, and like I had to find that sound to add it to a soundboard so I can just play it, because he'll just stop mid sentence to go, and it's just the
my
weirdest
God.
thing. So no, I'm for real. He loves that sound so much that's the only reason that movie gets a 6 from him.
Okay,
You know what? I can't even argue with that. I can't even. I think we should be more like Winchy.
Oh my God, no.
Winchy for president. Actually, I'd vote for you. So moving on. Oh wait, did Winchy give his?
Yeah,
He said 6,
6 out of
right?
10,
Okay, just making sure. I don't want to totally skip him. With that, we're gonna go ahead and move to the final part in this trilogy, and that is Star Wars Episode 3: Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think I know how this conversation is gonna go. This is, what people were waiting for. The 2-movie build up, that the finale that was gonna show us what George Lucas was cooking up for these prequels. Because what the fuck did we get in the beginning half, right? Some people till this day think it's in between the best piece of Star Wars content to I guess you could say mediocre. Some people think it's overrated, overhyped, besides a few scenes within this movie. I, for one, don't really share that. I think when I seen this movie, and I was grateful to be able to watch this movie in theaters, when I seen it, it was just everything that I wanted in a Star Wars movie. I think I felt as though they learned from the first two, the mistakes that happened, and really just hit go from the opening scene with the planes, the planes, the spaceships with Obi-Wan and Anakin. The little buzz droids were funny. The craziness that was the beheading of Count Dooku, when Homeboy was just like, fucking do it, man. And I was like, is he gonna do it? And
He did
sure
it.
enough, the noise that it makes, what Winchy said about the fucking burst, the bomb that comes out of the ship, that noise, that little shink, like that shit just forever will live goosebumps rent free in my head. The whole escaping in the ship, it ripping in half, like this movie's just action packed. It has everything that I wanted, seeing other worlds. Clones, actually, I don't think they took their helmet off in Attack of the Clones, but I think they were finally taking it off, though the CGI was kind of wonky. It was cool to at least see it in live action and actually happen. Grievous was a fun addition to this film. And they didn't open a lot of boxes, whereas they really sealed a lot. And I think they really, George Lucas being the architect, really paved the way, that path and that bridge that like gaps the prequel to the sequel. I mean, to the OG trilogy, perfectly. This one was fun. Before we get to the gripes, I really want to give it some flowers. So Josh, go ahead.
Exactly. This movie is the big finale, the big opera piece. Everything that the prequels decided to set up is paid off here. Anakin, Obi-Wan, everybody gets their closing arc right before the OG trilogy starts, and we get, Luke as our protagonist. This movie it does everything. It hits every marker. I think every Star Wars fan, for the most part, enjoys this movie for one thing or another. I don't believe it's overhyped or overrated as people think it is. I think it deserves all its flowers for simply what it does. It's a really good movie. It adds to the whole trilogy and everything. It's a really good movie.
Okay, all right. Nagata?
I definitely have almost nothing bad to say about this movie. You guys have kind of like hit on everything. I think that as far as like lightsaber combat and story elements go, it's definitely my favorite of the prequel trilogy. Episode 3 is just like the scene, like the Mustafar, everything on Mustafar is just like peak Star Wars for me. I think that this movie has the best lightsaber choreography out of any piece of Star Wars media that isn't a video game that's been released. I think that the the cadence in which Anakin speaks when he's finally so steeped in the dark side that he can't even see his best friend trying to reach out to him one last time because he's so clouded by, Palpatine's like infiltrating thoughts and stuff like that. Like I think that it is done the best. The only gripe that I have is, like the the jump, because like from the first two movies that like Obi-Wan has gotten this Padawan. They've spent the past 10 to 11 years together doing missions, whether it's for the Clone Wars or just, being Jedi diplomats, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see episode 3 and you're just like, dude, listen to your best friend. Like, obviously this guy is not lying to you. Like, please, please, Anakin, like see what he's trying to tell you. Come back.
Yeah.
Like be our poster child again. And it just doesn't happen. And
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Winchie?
I think Star Wars from the beginning was always meant to be about spaceships and laser swords. And I think, 1 and 2 did not really do a great job of the spaceships and laser swords focus. And I think 3 was a perfect spaceships and laser swords movie. Like you said, the opening sequence is dope spaceships. There's plenty of action there, plenty of flying around. It's awesome. We see all the different like various designs. Obi-Wan's little starfighter. He goes and finds Grievous and Grievous's starfighter. I think that all that's awesome. We see crazy, laser sword battles. Grievous, Dooku, Sidious, Vader. I mean, there's plenty of good content to go around. Plus, you get the fall from grace of the chosen one, the prodigal son. Great movie, love it.
Okay, all right,
That makes sense. Yeah.
perfect. So let's go ahead and get to the gripes that general audiences seem to have with this movie. So, one, I'll just pick it up kind of where we left off with Attack of the Clones. One thing that really doesn't pay off in this movie that people were wanting a payoff for, that was the beginning that started in Attack of the Clones, was the introduction of Boba and Jango Fett. Nothing really came about in Revenge of the Sith. Did anybody here miss that at all within Revenge of the Sith, or did we feel like our hands were full and didn't really give a shit?
Yeah, I don't really care.
No. Nikita, Winchie?
didn't really. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna say the same thing, but like, even though I'm, a Mando fanboy, I don't think we miss anything. We know Boba Fett's story. Like we had that, before we ever had Jango's, so I don't think it was really important at all.
Okay. You feel the same, Nikita?
Yeah, basically, it's you weren't given enough about it in the second movie to, like, it kind of sucks that they brought it up to some degree in the second movie. Like, I don't think it takes away from the second movie, but I feel like if there's no follow up on the third movie, it doesn't, like, it takes away from it, and it makes you think like, well, why'd you put this in the second one if you weren't going to follow it up? But like you said, I think there's so much going on that I didn't really care about it by the time the third movie came around. Like, in retrospect, if I go back and watch, I'm like, well, yeah, I wish you could have, dropped a little something maybe in 3, but I don't think it takes away from it, the fact that it's not there.
Yeah.
I would have, I know our hands were full with this movie. It would have been cool to have had like Boba's involvement in, say, the General Grievous scene, or just so we know that he was around still, instead of just being like, oh, this character fucked off after getting his dad's head sliced off. I think that's the only like problem. And Nikita said this before too, but like when you have to go and look at other pieces of media to get the full picture, I think that's where it kind of hurts. So general audience point of view, I guess I can understand that it was a loose end and people can kind of be disappointed about that. But there was kind of a couple of opportunities where they could have just, kind of slid him in there, kind of like what they did with the OG trilogy, where, people were like, oh, Boba's a badass because he kind of showed up and he's, Vader's go-to bounty hunter or whatever. Like, they could have really set him up by doing something like that. Like, their friendship or, their relationship goes past
Business.
just business or whatever. So, I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Well, like, what do you have him
context.
do?
Huh?
Well, what do you have him do? He's like 10 or 11 at the time. What do you have him do?
Well, kind of like what they were doing at with his character within the Clone Wars. By the time Revenge of the Sith rolls around, he would have been older.
Like what? Like
Yeah, he
close
would have
to
been 10 or
18?
11. No.
No, because in Attack of the Clones, wasn't he already 10 or 11?
That's
And
what I thought.
it was a 3 year, so he would have been
What,
like
like
14, 15. So like a
How?
teenager.
Oh, you know what? Maybe I don't know how old Boba was in the Clone Wars. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Yeah.
Well,
In
I
the
mean, he
second
was
movie.
aging up, and then they had a whole arc
In the
in
Clone
the
Wars,
Clone
he
Wars
was
that was scrapped. That
in-
where he was an adult. So
Oh yeah, that's he was a older teenager because when Attack of the Clones was happening, he was like 10 or 11.
yeah,
He wasn't younger than that. He was like 10, 11, close to teenage years for sure. So by the time Revenge of the Sith would have rolled around, it would have been
So he would have been 10 years old during episode 2. So he
Yeah.
would have been 13 in episode. Yeah. So what do you have a 13-year-old do though? Like realistically speaking.
I mean, if they were trying to make him become this badass within the Clone Wars, it would have been kind of fitting and maybe kind of, what George Lucas says, like poetry, if we would have seen him, kind of with, I wouldn't say with his crew, but kind of helping the Empire out with little things on the side, kind of like what Jango was doing in the second one, where he was taking tasks from Palpatine to, assassinate people. They could have done something like that where he was helping out Grievous on Utapau or something, and when shit got too hot, when the clones came through, he was like, I gotta go, I'm just a kid. And then, at least we know he was set up for something later on. I mean, I think we had our hands full, but I think that they could have added a little something, as when she's saying like he loves Jango and all that stuff. I kind of like Boba and that the whole Mandalorian stuff. So I would have kind of enjoyed something like that. I don't think it's a big gripe because we still ate good, but I could see where people were like loose end didn't get touched up.
no.
So, yeah, we know like Jango Fett was a great bounty hunter. We know that Boba Fett was the best bounty hunter, from the OG trilogy. But like, there was absolutely zero bounty hunter like content needed for Episode 3. Like, Boba Fett has always been like exclusively a bounty hunter. And we saw many Bobas and Jangos in the clones. Like, they're all Boba Jangos. Like, that's what they are. So we had plenty of like opportunities to see like personality of what a clone of Jango might be like, right? I really don't think adding Boba in would have helped. I feel like it would have detracted from the story, focusing on like a minor subplot where like they should hate each other. Vader and Boba should hate each other anyway. The fact that they have like a professional relationship later on when Vader is hiring bounty hunters to find Luke is like surprising given what happened to Boba's dad. But like, I don't think there should have been any like depth into adding to like Boba Fett's story here. Even in like the books that they made about Boba Fett, before the Clone Wars show ever came out, and before obviously the Boba Fett show came out, Boba never goes back to helping out either the Empire or the Republic. He fucks off and does his own thing, like his bounty hunter training arc, like way separate. The only character from the movies that he interacts with is Aura Singh, who you see for literally like 2 seconds in the Phantom Menace. So like, I really don't think adding him would have helped in any way.
This is where like a little pushback is that no, because if you have a prominent character that is badass that George Lucas brought from the OG trilogy that people were rooting for, and they're like, that's little Boba, I think people were expecting something out of it because of the fact that he was in the OG trilogy and didn't have anything.
I don't know.
I think people were expecting more because before the Book of Boba Fett and all that came out, Boba was at a high regard. People were like, "Hey, fuck this badass Boba," even though we didn't see anything happen. And they kind of make a joke about it. They're like, "Oh, in Attack of the Clones, Palpatine wanted Padme dead, so he didn't do it. He told somebody else to do it." And then Count Dooku was supposed to do it, so he didn't want to do it. He made Jango do it. Jango didn't want to do it, so he made somebody else do it. And she didn't want to do it, so she made an alien do it or whatever. It turned him into a joke kind of when they decided to introduce him but not have any kind of payoff at all whatsoever.
I'm in a whole nother boat because I don't think he mattered. I don't think he mattered at that point. I think exactly how his story goes in the movies is, yeah, he gets the inspiration to become a bounty hunter from his dad because he was a bounty hunter. He gets his dad's armor. We don't see him again, and then he shows up randomly in episode 5. I do not care for his character. Like, it was cool seeing him in the Bando and Book of Boba Fett and stuff, but I don't care for his character in the prequels. And then they try to make me care in Clone Wars, and it works a little bit because he actually has Mace Windu, by the neck and whatnot before it all comes crumbling down. But even then, that doesn't really pay off. He doesn't get the kill or whatever. So I kind of don't care about Boba Fett like that.
Okay.
Not enough to miss him in a movie where I'm literally getting everything I've desired since the first one.
Okay. What about you guys? Like I said, he was held at a high regard when this movie came out, when Revenge of the Sith came out and Attack of the Clones. The general audience cared about him. From a general audience perspective, people were expecting a payout. Now, yes, we did get more with the Clone Wars and all that, but what do you guys think that even with that pushback that, people could have been expecting something, especially with the name drop of Boba from Attack of the Clones?
Look, we saw what happened to kids in this movie. What was a 13? Like, even if he grew up a few years, what is a 13-year-old gonna do against a Force Jesus, B, Mace Windu, the best lightsaber duelist in the Jedi Order, a Yoda, an Obi-Wan? What is a 13-year-old Boba Fett who can't even fit into his dad's armor yet gonna do? Nothing. He adds nothing to the story. Even if he is doing little tasks for Grievous or something, it doesn't matter. If this movie were set maybe 8 to 10 years after Attack of the Clones, then maybe we could talk about where was Boba, but he's still a little kid. He's in middle school. The hell is he gonna do in a galactic war?
Yeah, basically.
Kids grow up in that galaxy, okay? Kids grow up.
No, they don't.
What about
not the younglings?
Oh yeah, not the younglings. That's a whole different category right there. Nikita, you share the same sentiment?
I mean, basically, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Is they added it in this, they added him in the second movie, and it was cool, but they didn't do anything with it in the third. So I just think it's not Boba's time to be in the spotlight. We want to see the downfall, so it's all about the downfall. Fuck a Boba, fuck them kids, leave them out.
We don't want no Bobas.
I just think it wasn't his time. This is one of the points where I want to be book supremacy, because the Boba that I get from the books, because I read the books about Boba before the third movie came out, so I had my Boba fill, and even then I was I don't really know what he's going to do at this point because he's still a kid. So I think where they left Boba was fine. I'm glad that they went back and touched on it with series. It's a different Boba than what I read about for sure, but this wasn't Boba's time to shine. The fact that they didn't develop on that character in these specific movies is fine with me.
Yeah, so basically you guys were we're worried about Anakin's downfall,
we
all
got
that
other
stuff.
things that
We don't.
Yeah.
Boba's not a.
Let's see the kid slaughter. Fuck an actual kid.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. Maybe we don't do that to kids, but maybe kill kids. That's fine. But whatever. Moving on though. So another thing that was told kind of felt unsatisfying within Revenge of the Sith was Padme's arc. coming from this badass female in Attack of the Clones who, toted a blaster,
Yeah.
fucking punched the animal in the face, did all this crazy shit, turned into a moping, pregnant lady throughout the whole movie that dies of sadness by the end of it, and people just, kind of rolled their eyes or like, well, she's perfectly fine, but she's just dying, and some people felt like that kind of cheapened her character as a whole. What do we think about Padme?
I don't see it. I don't see that gripe either. Like, what do you want her to do when she's pregnant, realistically? Like, that doesn't make any sense. She was having a child. Of course, she's going to want to focus on the diplomacy and her baby, right? I mean, that was always kind of her stance. She'll pick up a blaster if she has to, but she chooses the system first. So, I don't understand that gripe. That sounds ridiculous. She was pregnant. I don't know.
What about you guys?
Yeah, she again was pregnant. Pregnancy sucks. Like, you don't ever hear like stories about people who are like, my pregnancy was perfect, like no, like there's morning sickness, there's hormonal changes, there's food cravings, like it's not a fun time. Plus she's in the Galactic Senate while pregnant, still doing her job, trying to keep democracy from, going up in flames. And then the love of her life like goes evil. She watches a video of him slaughtering kids, and she dies of heartbreak, which is something that
she's like, what are you gonna do to these kids?
Like, people do die of heartbreak. Like, you can die of sadness. Like, that is a thing. So like, if you're gonna complain about that, I think you're not looking like where you need to be looking for story elements, if that's your gripe.
Okay. Winchie? Or Nikita, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm kind of like half and half on when she said, like, I understand the pregnancy and the hormones thing kind of changing you, because like it's no longer you, it's me and what's inside of me, and I need to protect what's inside of me because this is my child. So I understand that to some degree. I do not like, I understand you can die of a broken heart, and I can try to understand Padme of like dying of a broken heart, but that was the part that I didn't understand. I maybe it's because my mind does not work that way, because I'm going to be forever alone most likely, and I don't know what someone would feel if they were carrying my child and they suddenly saw me kill children. But the dying of heartbreak aspect is the only thing of that I actually have a gripe with. Padme's character development in the third movie, like finding out she's pregnant, finding out that she's still trying to hold the peace as far as Naboo is concerned, and be the senator that they need, be the voice of reason in the Republic, to let them know like war is not what we need. We need to pursue peace. We need to pursue other means besides enacting a giant clone army of millions plus soldiers. Like that I can understand. It's just the dying of a broken heart. I didn't want to see. And you know what? I guess this has to go with like me just wanting Anakin to see some fucking sense in the two people who love him most in this world. Like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be doing this shit. And he's like, nah, my empire, bro, my empire. We're gonna rule the galaxy. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, because from a film perspective, I could kind of harp off Nikita a little bit, is that they showed her to be this badass, and I think her dying of sadness would have hit harder if she was in the Senate, not with her face down, talking about, oh, I did my best, like there's nothing more that I could do. If she was fighting to the very end, and then in that climactic scene where he's like, it's you, blah 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 blah, it would have hit 10 times harder if at that moment everything broke. But her being sad throughout the whole film and have already given up all that hope, and yeah, maybe she didn't give up hope on Anakin, but she was already giving up on democracy. She was already giving up on everything else. By then, it was like, if she would have held her ground, I felt like it would have been more powerful, that ending, if she really was strong the whole way, and then boom, that gave it all up. Then I would have bought that dying of sadness. At that point, you everything just went wrong for you, where you found your home, your hope, and everything. And this is, coming from the girl that was okay with psychotic killing in the last movie. So it's, I would have expected a little bit more from her character. And, knowing that she birthed this badass that was Leia, how much better would it have been if she was holding on and was a fighter up until the very end, just like Leia?
I thought she was. I mean, yeah, she was trusting the whole thing, and then once Palpatine gives his speech about the Empire and stuff, and she says her line and whatnot, she was like, well, there you go. Her job there had been finite. She looked to her man, who was actively losing his shit, and went to confront him. Like, yeah, that was past the breaking point at that point. Like, I don't see it. I think she ended up fighting till the end.
Okay. All right. You guys, any pushback on what I said? Anybody?
I think she was also fighting towards the end. Like, I think that she never didn't have the future of the Republic like out of her mind. I think that was present from when we see the character first with her being in disguise till the very end when she dies. I think she wholeheartedly had the interest of like the galactic public as like the forefront of her heart and her mind.
Yeah.
Maybe not the like the for sure front lines, but definitely like, top 3 thoughts, right? The obviously she's thinking about the love of her life.
I mean, this is the same girl that we saw in the Phantom Menace that like changed disguises, that her people were dying of famine and starvation and all this stuff because of the blockade that was happening. She went off world, she snuck off, she whooped ass, she killed people. In the second one, same thing, she held her own, even fell out of a ship and survived and shit. Like, that was crazy. She landed on sand and they were like, she made it. And by this one, she's just like, oh, democracy's dying, I'm just gonna mope. Like, no, I mean, that same girl would have had that energy to like fucking fight till the very, very end of it.
She was pregnant. And
it don't matter if she's pregnant, bro.
Yes, she was young,
yes, it does.
Full of youth and willing to fight for something moving downhill fast. And she was pregnant, and her man was losing her shit.
And also in like that first movie.
Great.
Yeah, in that first movie, she's like 14.
Speaking, she didn't know he was losing his shit until Obi-Wan came and was like, "Hey, your man's losing."
What do you mean? Throughout the whole movie, he's actively telling her like, "I want more. There's more that I gotta be doing." He's telling her about the flashbacks and stuff. Like, he is actively losing his shit.
He's saying that he's scared to lose her. That's about it. And she's trying to be reassuring to him that you're not gonna lose me.
Yeah, and there's a whole line in there where he's like, I want more power. There's a whole line there.
He says, I want more power so he doesn't lose
exactly.
her. And then she reassures him.
Exactly. He is actively losing his shit in front of her.
Yeah, the ends don't justify the means there.
I would have thought it would have still, because I mean, if she's holding on to him, she would have held on to everything, all aspects of her reality, but the democracy, she was holding on to him throughout the whole movie, which is fine. Obviously the pregnancy, all that, she's having his kid, yes, but what about the rest of the badassery? She just kind of just dies.
What do you I don't know what you want from her. I don't know what
I told you what I wanted.
I don't know what movie you want a whole pregnant woman to be fighting like that.
I wanted her to stand in front of the tables. I wanted her to make sure that she was making her voice heard, not mope around with her head down, but talking about, oh, this is, like, I did my best. There's nothing I can do. That they actively knew that Palpatine was holding on to power that he wasn't supposed to hold on. She put him into power. She would have been like, I need to help stop this man. And if she would have been a badass in the fucking political side, at least, like she was throughout the whole Clone Wars, like she was throughout the... No, she wasn't. She gave up. That's the problem. She gave up, and so she was already tired. So how you die of tired if you were already tired? That's what you guys are saying. That's what you guys are saying. You said she's tired because she's pregnant. So how you die from being tired all the time?
That is
already
not what we said. She actively fought for 3 years on something that was going downhill fast, and then she got pregnant her man was losing her shit. I don't know. There's no way for her to pick up a blaster and fight like she was
I'm just
young
saying.
again.
All you men over here are saying that women can't handle a pregnancy. That's what you guys are saying.
That's not
That's
what
right.
we're saying at all.
That's right. I caught it.
She was
No,
handling
you
a
can't
pregnancy.
handle a pregnancy when there's a galactic war going on. The love of your life is killing and slaughtering whole villages at one time. That's a lot, man.
She forgot
Who
about that
said
shit.
she didn't handle it? Like,
she totally
she
forgot about that
handled
shit. She was like, "What kids?" Like she didn't know. She didn't worry about that. She didn't worry about that the whole time.
She's like, this is the
The moment-
anniversary you slaughtered the family, remember? Like,
Like she didn't care. She was like, "We're starting our own family.
no.
Just don't kill those kids."
No,
you know.
no. Even that, he tries. He tries.
I mean, actively.
She'd be mad disappointed in him. But, yeah, no. She fought until the end. I don't see that gripe of everyone being upset that she died of sadness. And even then, behind the scenes, we know Palpatine was siphoning her life force, so it doesn't even matter to us.
Yeah, but from a film perspective,
And I said that. I gave both sides.
yeah, from a film perspective, it didn't show that she was giving her all. I'd say that much.
Well, you're full of it then. 'cause
Obviously, we know the backstory and all that, but I can personally say I don't think that she was giving that much.
then you're insane.
I don't know, man. I don't know that maybe I can share a point here with these people, who have this gripe, but we got one more, which I mean I'm guessing it kind of boils down to what we talked about before, is the writing. Obviously, do we feel like the writing was an issue in this one as it was in the previous two movies, or do you feel like he kind of helped it a little bit?
I don't see a problem. That's just me. I don't see a
Oh,
problem.
you like the Attack of the Clones 2 dialogue. This was more for them. Go ahead, Nikita. When she hit.
I don't think there's any problem with the writing in this. I feel like there needed to be more detail about why Jar Jar was chosen as like Padme's stand-in. Like I understand that he was relevant to the plot in the first movie, not really that around in the second one. So like, why was he the one who was chosen to be the representative of Naboo? Like, sure, there's Gungans on Naboo and Gungan representation is important, but why the idiot that we know is an idiot to, like help cascade Palpatine into power? Like, that's the only little writing aspect of the movie. Like, just solely looking at the movie, like, I understand why he was chosen from like a lore aspect and things of that nature, but like, as far as the movie is concerned, like, why would you knowingly put the fucking idiot as like the guy who's gonna make a choice that eventually brings about Palpatine coming into power? And like, you find out from the books, like, Jar Jar lives in exile because of that fucking decision. Like, that decision ruined his entire fucking life, and like, you don't get any of that from any of the movies. And I feel like that was like, if you're not a Star Wars fan, you're just looking at these as the movies, like, that's the only bad writing part, but everything else is pretty chef's kiss for me. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay. All right. Any pushback from anybody on that one?
No.
What about you, Winchie? You agree, disagree?
Jar Jar being placed in that position was probably meant for Palpatine to manipulate him into getting what he wanted. I mean, Palpatine's plan was a very like well thought out plan. Like, took it was the culmination of like 1,000 years of Sith tomfoolery, and yeah, I don't really have any gripes with the movie. Definitely not about Padme, that's for sure. But yeah, no, I think the writing was pretty good. No gripes.
Okay. I mean, the writing. I mean, you had two movies to perfect it, Lucas. At least I would assume a little bit would have been improved for the third one, which it was. I don't see the gripe with it. I do think that there's a couple lines in there that you can kind of be like, oh, yeah, George Lucas was still here. But I mean, for the most part, I think he did get somebody. He heard the response of Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace, and he kind of just got somebody who finally wasn't a yes man, and they helped clean it up as best as they could. And I mean, the final product was the final product. And I guess one of the writing errors that a lot of people, it just set the whole world into an uproar, was that, satisfying ending, right? We get there, we're at the end, fucking Anakin's a vegetable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sliced up in a quickness, and we see him get rebuilt back together as Darth Vader, and he has that powerful moment where he crushes everything, breaks his arm out, and all that. And then right after that, he hits us with a no. How do we feel about that, guys? Because a lot of people thought it was the worst thing to come out of this movie.
I don't think.
I always laugh. I always laugh at the Mustafar scene because when she once basically described the entire the ending of it as Obi-Wan turning Anakin into a pocket pussy, and it just always makes me laugh. And so the second you mentioned that scene, the first thought that came to mind was pocket pussy Anakin. Yeah, but I thought that was the ending of that movie was a great way. I love the no scene, because Palpatine has had his claws, his feelers inside of Anakin's brain, and then it's from that moment they take full root because he's like, I didn't you know what, you killed Padme, you are the reason the love of your life is dead. Now you have no other reason for living, so serve me. And I like that. I think that is Star Wars Sith poeticism.
Okay. All right. What about you, Winchie? What do you think about that famous no scene?
I thought it was great. I mean, if I was confined to a metal body, unable to move really yet, and you just told me that my wife got, died as a result of my actions, I'd probably be screaming the same shit. So, yeah, I'd have been cool with that scene.
I don't think I would have screamed no. I would have been like, "What the fuck you do to her, bruh? You said she was good, bruh."
Just been like, "Fuck."
Right.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it from a fan standpoint and from a movie standpoint. This is the culmination of everything that's been going on, like you said, since the first one. And if you, from a Star Wars point, a fan point, this is meant to be, again, an exaggerated opera kind of thing. This is the final end of that before we get into the next
the final nail in the coffin for his arc.
Yeah, so that dramatic no is something I imagined a big finale opera thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I enjoy it from both aspects, film wise and fan wise.
Mm-hmm. And I would say from I guess an artistic standpoint, I mean, how can you really convey behind a suit that you are sad about it? I guess Lucas was like, just say no, maybe. So I can kind of see where, from behind the scenes standpoint, how can you make them feel regret and show that off within the mask, without, maybe they didn't think about it, but that whole, Iron Man trope where, they put you can see the face on the inside. That, I mean, yeah, I didn't expect them to stand up and be like, fuck. She's dead?
Damn.
That's just crazy. So I don't really share that gripe either. I think that one's more of a nitpick, and maybe for some people it's too cheesy that they're just check me out kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think, knowing, well, obviously as a fan perspective, I know I can care for the character and know, hey, this is a way that he would have probably conveyed it. And then the scenes after that showing, that they hit his children and everything, his whole world just crumbled apart right there. How else are we going to convey that action?
Yeah, he was, I mean, you get it from everything there alone. He was angry, and then, that no was a cry of despair, basically. So, chef kiss, really.
Chef kiss. Okay, so I think that's basically it. I mean, well, I will touch upon it because everybody knows the worst offender of CGI is Attack of the Clones, but still this movie gets some thumbs down for some of the CGI. Same thing, groundbreaking movie, did a lot. I mean, we were able to see Tamara Morrison's head this time outside of the helmet, and more than for just, I think he did take it off in Attack of the Clones. I just can't remember. I think it was just one scene. But I really firmly believe, I think Revenge of the Sith, I got to rewatch it just to see that little nitpick. But I don't think the CGI was completely just off the walls bad, but I can understand where people were like, that's too much CGI in this movie.
Well, I mean, this one, it obviously looks better than the other two. But compared to movies now, yeah, it's going to look dated. but I don't think there's anything wrong with it per se either. Other than that, it's probably dated.
Okay, so kind of the makings of it hits hard a little bit. What do you guys think?
I agree with that. I love the fucking chicken lizard that Obi-Wan gets to ride on Utapau. Fucking love that chicken lizard thing. It makes some great sounds.
Hell
But
yeah.
I didn't really think that any of the CGI was really like over the top or too overused or anything.
Yeah.
I think the most you see it on is Count Dooku in the beginning.
Yeah, when they have to like Photoshop his head in order for the stunt double or whatever.
Yeah, and then Palpatine, when he's flipping and shit.
When they crush Obi-Wan with the little.
Yeah, so it's like
thing.
little things here and there, but for the most part, the movie looks polished. Grievous looks fucking amazing.
What about you, Winchy? What do you think?
Yeah,
CGI.
there's a few spots where like the CGI is definitely noticeable. Yeah, especially that one scene where Obi-Wan gets squished. I see that one and I cringe at that one a little bit. But most of the other stuff I think is well done. I mean you have to save budget somewhere at some point, so I understand like the couple scenes that aren't just like absolutely, Avatar quality flawless. I think it's good.
Yeah. I mean, Avatar wasn't even a thing when this movie came out.
It's a few years shy of Avatar.
I would say that money shot when they like zoomed into Grievous's face and you just seen all that like detail in his face. Like I think those scenes make it worth it. I think the scene where he goes against those two droids in the ship in the beginning, I think that scene's worth it. The CGI is flawless when the ship's falling from the fucking atmosphere. I think it makes it worth it. So I will still say that Attack of the Clones is still the worst offender. So CGI for me is not really a gripe in this one, considering where we came from.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess from a general audience standpoint, if you get sick of CGI, then it's not really your movie. But think about it. They're not really in space. The whole space is CGI. With that, I mean, let's get started with the ranking, or at least the rating. For me, this is the ultimate conclusion. It did what it needed to do. Yes, I can kind of agree with the whole Padme thing. I think that's where it kind of drops a couple points for me, because she was this badass character that I cared about, and she was kind of reduced a little bit in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I mean, loose ends or not, I understand people have gripes about Jango Fett. I know some people think that they introduced a lot of things that weren't paid off within Revenge of the Sith. I could totally get that from a general audience perspective, but then again, we've come so far from that time that we have a lot of context in other shows and other media that we can look back at it with. So nostalgia for sure plays a factor in this movie as well. I mean, I showed my Julie these movies, and she didn't know that this was the whole story, and the shock value was just insane when she found out that he was Darth Vader. So I think there's still some impact there when you watch these movies for the first time. This movie's an 8, solid 8, 100%.
Okay.
What do you think?
Really good movie. Fan and moviegoer wise, I think this one just does everything that the second one set up really well, other than Boba Fett, I guess. There's no real gripes here. This movie is just one that I feel like you can watch on its own, as a Star Wars fan, maybe not as a moviegoer, but like you could just put this bitch in, enjoy it for a cool minute, and then move on. Yeah, I'm there with you. Like 8 out of 10, 8.5.
8.5. Get out of my head, bruh. Nakeda, you want to get started first?
I get a lot of my favorite things from Star Wars out of this movie. The lightsaber fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin, where we get the Obi-Annie move, the R2-D2 screams throughout the movie where he screams and then hits the wall. Love that. The Obi-Wan, hello there, to General Grievous. Like a lot of iconic scenes from this movie will, rent free in my head, obviously. I'm kind of aligned with you guys. I give this one an 8 out of 10 for sure. I think that there are some small issues that I wish would have been taken differently, but again, this movie is all about the like the last bit of the fall of our grand hero, the one who's supposed to be Force Christ, and he falls to the dark side, finally becomes that iconic black clad character with the billowing cape that we see in the opening of the original trilogy. So definitely my favorite of the prequel trilogy. So yeah, I'll sit with my 8 out of 10 proudly.
Okay. And just you saying that little R2D2 scene, like thinking back to it, that little cartoony fucking when the B2 droid slipped on the oil and he fell and he got burned up by R2. I was like, this is the cheese that Lucas brings to these movies. But Winchie, what do you think? What's your rating for episode 3?
I also will give it an 8.5 out of 10. It is the highest rated of all the Star Wars movies for me. Just again, I love the clones. I love all that stuff. I think they were really, really done well in this movie. The so many lightsaber fights, so many awesome lightsaber fights. The Sith at like the height of their power, Anakin at the height of being, not a pocket pussy covered in droid parts.
Yeah,
it's a great movie. I love the humor of like all the little droids. I've always loved the humor of Roger, and yeah, there was good humor, there was good story, there was some clearly fucked up stuff. Like it wasn't lacking in anything in my opinion. It wasn't the greatest movie of all time, but definitely a solid rewatch. Like if somebody said you have to rewatch a Star Wars movie every day for the rest of your life, I mean, I'd pick that one probably.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
I'm with that.
Yeah, can't be mad at that.
I can be mad about anything.
That's true.
And he'll fight with you just to fight with you.
Okay. I'm sure it makes for great content. But I do appreciate you guys coming through. We're wrapping the bout, so just bear with me. I know you guys wanted to get to Filoni and all that, but that's going to be for the sequel trilogy when we talk about that,
For
and
sure.
when we get to our ranking. But one thing's for sure that I do want to talk about, kind of like as a side note, if you guys still have time to chat, is we talked a little bit about the Clone Wars, the little spin-offs that we got for the prequel era. Just for the fans out there that haven't dipped their toe in the animation material for the prequels, or for anything out there, I want to start with the Force Unscripted here. Either of you guys can start it off, but do you guys feel like it's mandatory viewing, the Bad Batch, the Clone Wars, now that we're in a future time, for people to get some more context for this show, for these movies? And do you feel like having all these shows is a good thing, or should all these questions get answers within movies for general audiences purposes? I know it's a lot. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Winchie, you can take this one first if you want.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. We'll start small first. So, what do you feel like it's mandatory viewing to watch the Clone Wars, Bad Batch, all these prequel era side shows, to give more context, for those general audiences that are afraid to jump into the Clone Wars, or afraid to jump into an animated Star Wars project that isn't mainstream within the box office or in your face?
Mandatory, no, but highly encouraged, yes. Like if you have the time and you want more Star Wars content, it's great Star Wars content. Yeah, some of it is tailored towards a younger audience, but it's got good story. It's still Star Wars, and it does explain a lot of things and really set up, like, I know we haven't talked about the Filoni era, so I'm not going to go into that, but it really sets up all the stuff that's coming out now that people are confused about. Like pretty much every one of the confusions that most people have about the newer shows is explained in one of the animated shows, even if it's not like entirely necessary for the enjoyment of the live action content. It is definitely a boon in like enjoyment for like understanding what's going on, or like little Easter eggs and that kind of thing.
Okay. All right. What about you, Nikita?
I think it all comes down to the person who is experiencing the Star Wars. Like if you're like me, then I think that everything that is put out is something that you'd probably want to like watch and at least analyze and be like, "Oh, okay, this part of this little information was referenced in this. So, okay, this helps me understand this." But if you're just the type of person who is like not really into Star Wars, you're like, oh, I'm watching Star Wars because my friend wants to watch this with me and I want to hang out with my friend, then no, it's not. If you find a little piece of information that you want to have, like, more knowledge about, and the person who's showing you is like, oh, well, you could read this book or you could watch this series, and you decide that that's something that you want to allocate time to, then go for it. But I don't think that any of the side series are necessary to enjoy Star Wars for what it always has been, what it is now, and what it will be. I don't think that it's completely necessary to do that because the OG trilogy is something that you can watch by itself. And that was all the content, media wise for Star Wars for a long time. And people were very satisfied with the series overall. I think that if going from there, if you want to know what happens after or why we got the big bad that we got in Darth Vader, sure, consider watching the other movies, consider watching the other side plots. But I don't think it's absolutely necessary to enjoy Star Wars. Maybe to fully enjoy Star Wars and understand every little intricacy, idiosyncrasies of these characters, sure. But is it necessary to just enjoy Star Wars as good slash decent media, just depending on your perspective of films and media in general? Then no, not really.
Okay, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessary for much. Like I know, I wouldn't say the Clone Wars or anything animated like that is necessary unless you actually want to check it out. I mean, even then, there's a few arcs in there that I would deem, unnecessary to watch.
Filler.
Yeah. But on the other hand, you get people who just started out with Mando and stuff. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like that's their first experience with Star Wars, and you find out that this is insane. How do I continue to watch this? And Mando falls between Empire and Force Awakens and stuff, so it does get kind of muddy there because at that point you're dipping your toes into movies.
Yeah.
But versus like watching movies and going to the show. So I would say it's a bit of here and there depending on where you start.
Well, okay, and that I don't want to like label what you guys said, but I'm gonna say, at least in my head, what your guys' answer is good for like a fan perspective. Like if you're a fan of Star Wars, then you don't really necessarily need to go and watch these things, but if you really want to expand your fandom, go ahead. You know what I mean? Like that's perfectly fine, and I think it's great. But I think from a film business, movie business, all that stuff, I think they did make it mandatory viewing. I think it's something that people need to watch. I'm only talking about the prequels. Obviously, in the next episodes, we'll talk about Rebels and all that stuff, and is that mandatory viewing? But at least for the prequels, I would say if not too much Bad Batch, unless you really want to bridge that gap, or I mean, maybe at this point, from my point, I'm probably going to have to say that it is mandatory viewing as well because it adds context. But at least for the movies, I think the Clone Wars is a show that is mandatory viewing because it ties up some loose ends that were brought into by Attack of the Clones, and from a business perspective, it's great because you make it mandatory viewing, you make it a mission for people to come and watch these things. Not just because they're beautiful, but because of the fact that if you want to know everything, you're gonna want to have to watch it. So I think from a general audience, like I think it is a mandatory view. I think it is from a general audience perspective. Fandom, I mean, you could dip your toe in for whatever reason, and then if you're not a fan, you're not a fan. If you are, you want to dive deep, it's optional. It's always optional, but I think from general audience perspective, got to be mandatory.
I don't know if I agree with that.
It adds a lot of depth.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
a lot of depth. And like how we said before too, Count Dooku as Tyrannus, you wouldn't know that unless you're watching the Clone Wars.
Exactly. But if you watch all three, with the exception of the Clone Wars, that name drop just becomes a name drop, and you're just like, oh, we don't really give a
You
fuck about
move
this
on.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's like, necessary viewing.
But then that's when you get division, right? I believe. Hear me out. That's when you get, people that are completely versed, like, how the Force Unscripted is, where, they know Legends, they know canon, they know all this stuff. But then you get other people that just know the movies.
Yeah.
And then you're over here trying to bridge the gap, and they're like, well, the movies fucking suck. And you're just like, Star Wars fucking sucks. And then, there's us that are like, no, it doesn't. And we have context.
Yeah.
It's out there if you want to watch it.
Yeah.
So, as a fan, and maybe as a, business style too, I would say they are mandatory viewing. I would think. What do you guys think?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I still go back to my answer. It really depends on who's watching, right? Like, I don't think that you need all the context to, like, I don't think you need all the context of the Clone Wars specifically to
What about Anakin's
appreciate
fall
them
and all
that.
Well,
I'm getting to that part. Like,
yeah.
if you're like me and you're like, if you watch 2 and then go watch 3, and you, like, the first question is like, what the fuck happened to Anakin? Like, yes, go watch the Clone Wars, because then you understand. And that was something that I didn't have at the time. But like, not everyone wants to put in 6 seasons of watching an animated series to do that, So I really think it comes down to who's watching. I would never say it's mandatory though.
Okay. All right. Sake of fandom too, like that whole disconnect that happens between the movies and those that know more within depth. You don't think that plays a role?
If you're talking about like the Star Wars fandom, then I say, if you're saying that you're a part of the Star Wars fandom, then you should definitely consume all the media. I think that makes it, if you're talking specifically about like Star Wars fandom for the sake of like disconnects and arguments, like, yes, consume every bit of media before you cast judgment on something that maybe 20% about. If that's the perspective we're looking for, from the perspective like of arguments within the fandom, then yes, everything is mandatory.
Okay. All right. Winchy, what about you?
No, I'm the same. General audience, it's not necessary for you to watch all those things unless you really want that context. But yeah, if you're going to say you're a fan and then complain about something that is explained in one of those things, or like, you're like, oh, they didn't give us enough information in this. And it's like, well, what about XYZ? Like, if you're saying that you're like a big fan or part of the fandom or whatever, and you haven't watched the things and then you have shit to say about them, well, you're just wrong.
Yeah, go brush up on your homework.
Even if it's a valid opinion, right? And like, if you haven't seen the things and you're just, riding the coattails of somebody you saw on Reddit or something, like, you're just wrong because you never consumed the content in the first place.
So I don't know how tied into you guys are into like Twitter and specifically Star Wars Twitter, but like literally right now, there is a big uproar in the community going around because they revealed a Hondo Anaka like animatronic thing.
I saw this.
Yeah, and some guy posted like, yeah, I think this is cool and all, but I don't know anything about this character, blah blah. And everyone's just like, well, if you fucking watched Clone Wars, you'd know exactly who Hondo Ohnaka is. And he even says like who he is when they're doing the animatronic thing. So like, yeah, if you're considering yourself like a part of the Star Wars fandom and you're gonna bitch about something that you don't know about because you simply haven't watched, then like shut the fuck up. Like, it's mandatory for you. Yeah, exactly.
This is how they birth toxic fandom. That's exactly where it goes. Like, people, and that's why I guess you're right. I guess from a fandom perspective, you would have to watch everything. You should be consuming the media if you want to be well versed in all this.
Yeah.
For general audiences, but that's where box office comes from. That's where general audiences is where where if you want what you want, these are the people that are buying the tickets that they have to enjoy it. That's the same reason why they didn't put a big love, like they put it in your face in Attack of the Clones, the whole love interest between, because they obviously got to get somewhere in order, but they didn't go too deep into it. And that's because children and people got to watch it, so that puts people off in and itself. But then you've got this beautiful love story that kind of builds in the background, but general audiences don't see that. All they see is the botched mess that is on their screen, and then box office dries up, and then you don't get Star Wars movies for the next fucking 7 years. Disney, what the fuck, bro? Anyways, I'm sorry, I spazzed out. What do you guys think about that?
Disney makes all the Disney princess movies, so if Disney is shying away from romance, that's literally what their like market has been for the last forever. So if they're not going to capitalize on a romance in a show because of the youth, that's just stupid. But other than that, I kind of agree with what you're saying.
Okay, all right. So I guess fandom, if you're out there, if you haven't watched Bad Batch, if you haven't seen the Clone Wars, go watch that.
Go watch that stuff.
If you want to be well versed. If you don't, fuck it. You just take for face value what you get, and don't bitch about it.
Yeah.
Right? Correct.
Basically.
Keep your mouth shut.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you don't talk shit, get hit.
And I guess before this episode wraps up, I guess it's worth mentioning that Filoni did work on the Clone Wars. And I just want to give big emphasis because we are going to be doing more collabs with the Force Unscripted, and we thank you once again for coming on. We hope to do an episode with you guys on your platform soon, so make sure you guys go follow them for when that happens as well. Do you guys have anything to close out with? Out of curiosity, you guys want to let people know where to find you guys and all that?
Socials or something?
I mean, so first off, thank you for having us on here. It's been a blast. I love to get to talk to let's talk about Star Wars in kind of any venue, any aspect. So this has been an absolute wonderful blast. But if you want to stay up to date on our content, we're basically the Force Unscripted on every major podcasting platform. On Twitter, we are just at Force Unscripted, so feel free to follow us. We right now we are on a hiatus ourselves. We've been doing a couple of guest starring appearances. This is our first, and we were very excited to get to do this. But currently we're just dropping like small little mini segments every Tuesday right now while we're getting our art and stuff prepped for our next season, and then we'll be hitting the ground running. You guys will be one of our first guest appearances on our end too. So we're really excited about that. We have those plans in the motion too. But outside of that, thank you for having us. It's been a blast. Hunter, you got anything? Or sorry, Winchy, you got anything else to say?
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having us. It's always a good time to talk with people who have opinions aside from Nikita and my own, because we do end up agreeing on a lot of stuff, so it is fun to argue our point. We do enjoy flexing our argumentative skills, especially when it comes to Star Wars. So yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
For sure.
Yeah. And we can't wait to get into that. I think it's gonna get even juicier in the back end as we go down the road. But like I was saying too, it's worth mentioning that Filoni's gonna be he is a creator on the Clone Wars and Bad Batch and Rebels and all that, so he's gonna be a name for those listening out there. So just to keep up with us, if you haven't, we recommend the viewing and of Star Wars in general, and we hope you guys enjoy it, and go check out their podcast as well. Like I said, brush up on Filoni because he's gonna be a big topic in the next coming up episodes with the Force Unscripted podcast. But with that being said, we'll talk to you guys on the next one, and Force Unscripted, thank you once again.